Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Okay, I'm going to take my mask off when I'm presenting. So. It seems that they're seeing that upper left-hand corner. Okay, just let me test Alex.
Voice is coming through on his computer. You want to chat really quickly? Okay, but just to confirm.
Probably here because the plaque is here. Jenny, how are you? I'm doing well. Yeah, this is great. It's run, what a kind of beautiful setup and lovely breakfast and everything this morning. Yeah.
Just use this one. It's so you know a lot of times like unless you are okay clipping it, and then you can kind of just.
Why don't I just clip it?
There you go.
Yeah, should we start now? Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone. We're about to get started. Please come and take your seats. Feel free to bring some of your breakfast to your seats, and we're going to get the program started. Would you mind, Matthew, just, I see Kim and Dave and folks are still outside. They might not have heard. Yeah, come up near the front, everybody. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Berkeley EECS Annual Research Symposium, or BEARS. I'm Claire Tomlin, and I'm the chair of the EECS department. And it's a real pleasure to welcome so many of you here in person in Soda Hall and also on our webinar. So we're broadcasting this on Zoom, and we have a number of participants who are joining us remotely. We are going to have a morning and then a lunch of discussions about research and honoring our alumni. We call this symposium this year Convergence, and we have research seminars from our faculty across different areas, kind of converging into the bringing together of cyber physical systems and human perception into cyber physical systems. We have a talk on plastic dynamicism and autonomous vehicles. And we're going to talk about our expanding opportunities at Moffett Field. So our program this morning has some introductory remarks, and then we're going to honor our distinguished alumni. And then we have a series of 5 faculty talks, and those talks are going to be about 20 minutes each with 5 minutes for questions. And there'll be a short break in the middle of the program this morning, and then we welcome you to, for those of you here, to stay for lunch, and we'll have lunch served out on the terrace. For those of you on Zoom, if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom. The chat, you might notice, is disabled, but you can ask questions through Q&A, and we'll be monitoring those. So we'll bring your questions to the speakers in real time. And if you have other questions about the department or anything related to the program, the staff will be able to answer those questions in real time. The entire program is going to be recorded for later viewing. And so we have, as I said, a number of talks, and I think most of these talks will be recorded, if not all of them. Okay, so before we start the program of talks, it's a great pleasure to give a little bit of an introduction to the department. And I've got a few slides to introduce the department. So as I said, I'm the chair of EECS. We now have, because it's such a big department, we now have 3 chairs. So I'm the EECS chair. Clark Nguyen is the EE division chair, and David Wagner is the CS division chair, and EECS co-chairs, and they'll be joining us this morning as well. You met Clark. For those of you who were at breakfast, you met Clark. I'd also like to highlight, we have many staff who are involved in this morning's event, but 2 very important staff, Josephine Williamson, our Director of Operations, and Bennett Angjoo, who's the Director of External Relations. I'd like to thank both of them for their leadership in helping to organize this program. Okay, let me just say a few words about our department. We are a unified EECS department. There are very few unified EECS departments across the country, around the world. And it's kind of a badge of honor for us to be a unified EECS department. We're the largest undergraduate program in the world of its kind. And we're at the forefront of research. So as you'll see some of that research in the research seminars today, we're at the forefront of groundbreaking research in computer architecture, AI, operating systems, databases, and many other areas. And if we look at our graduates, Berkeley EECS graduates comprise the core of today's technology industry. A couple of the numbers. So we're the largest undergraduate program in the world of its kind. Our department hosts the 2 largest undergraduate majors, the CS major and the EECS major. Added together, that's about more than 3,800 undergraduate students in our department. A couple of other numbers, almost $1 million research expenditure per faculty, per full-time equivalent faculty. So those are grants that our faculty bring in to support their research programs. Our faculty boasts 6 Turing Award winners and 34 National Academy of Engineering members. So we're a joint department, and I like this slide because it shows that, why it's so important to be a joint department. We have an amazing EE division and an amazing CS division, and we have a really amazing overlap. And it's at that overlap that you really see a lot of the kind of magic happen here. So you can see a lot of the core areas in each division and the kind of bringing together of expertise from backgrounds in computer science and electrical engineering to like really host that overlap. Our rankings. So we're doing pretty well. If you look at our undergraduate program, this is the US News and World Report rankings, the latest in 2022. In EE, we're ranked number 2, and in CS, we tie for number 1. And we're consistently kind of jockeying around the 1, 2, 3 mark in terms of our rankings, which is pretty amazing given that we're competing with private schools, smaller, wealthy private schools. Our graduate programs, in EE, we're tied for number 1, and in CS, we're tied for number 2. So also pretty amazing. I listed here just some of our new faculty that we hired in the past couple of years. So we're maintaining a fantastic group of faculty, and it's really wonderful to have these new faculty join. A couple have been here for the past 2 years, 1 year, and some joined this year. So really adding to a vibrant group of faculty that we already have. In terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, over the past several years, we've been broadening the diversity of our faculty. So since 2018, EECS has hired 37 new faculty, 15 of those are women, and 4 are from underrepresented minority groups. We are very active in a number of programs that help to improve the diversity of our faculty, including Rising Stars in EECS, which we help to organize and host, Next Prof, and Presidential Postdoctoral Fellows, all programs which seek to increase the number of women and underrepresented minorities in the faculty. We do a lot of work to broaden the diversity of our graduate student body, a lot of equity work in our graduate student admissions. And we support the diversity of our graduate and undergraduate students through a number of programs and also kind of events that we hold, like listening sessions, town halls. We have recently started, as of last year, an anti-racism committee across EECS and data science. And we've introduced a new course in social justice. Let me say a little about our leadership above the department. So we're also, as EECS, we're a single department, but we're governed by 2 bodies, the College of Engineering and now the fairly new Division of Computing, Data Science and Society, or CDSS. Sujay King Liu is the Dean of the College of Engineering. She's an electrical engineer. And Jennifer Chase is the Associate Vice Provost of this division of CDSS. She's also an EECS professor. So we're well represented in our leadership. And if we look at the college and divisions, so COE and CDSS, their fundraising priorities, they've done a lot of fundraising, a lot of action for fundraising in EECS. By raising money to enable new faculty hires in growth research areas, as well as teaching faculty positions, raising money from philanthropy for increasing graduate student fellowships. So some of our graduate students are on named fellowships, creating endowed chairs and professorships to support our faculty. Raising money for spaces. So Jennifer Chase is doing a lot of work now to raise funding for the new Gateway building, which is supposed to be finished within the next couple of years, down on the old Tolman building site. And also modernizing facilities and equipment within the buildings that within the footprint that we already have. And also raising funding to accelerate new faculty careers for example, startup funding for our new faculty. What is our vision? Well, our vision is really to maintain our current strengths in teaching and research, but also to embrace new initiatives. You're going to hear a little bit about that in the research seminars today. We are looking at a kind of whole new era in integrated circuits and physical electronics. And we've got some very exciting directions that we're looking at there. We're one of the leaders in AI, and that we're kind of pushing the frontiers, looking at natural language processing as one of the key directions we're moving in, as well as like taking AI and machine learning and incorporating it into a number of different fields. We're excited about the interface between biology and EECS, and we're growing in that area. In aerospace and EECS, and you'll hear a little bit more about that this morning, as well as growth in all areas of robotics and automation. So those are just a few of the directions that we're really investing in and thinking about centers and core funding to enable growth. Okay, so with that, I'd like to conclude my introduction and move on to the next very exciting aspect of our program, which is to present our Distinguished Alumni Awards. And then following that presentation, we'll have the series of 5 presentations. And this is just a list. So we have Professor Sanjit Seshia, Professor Angjoo Kanazawa, Professor Eric Paulos, Dr. Alan Yang, and Professor Alex Bayen, who are all going to give their perspectives about their research area, vision, and directions that they're going. We'll have a short break in the middle. And you're welcome to, replenish your coffee at any time and step out on our beautiful terrace during the break. And then we invite you to lunch after the conclusion of the program this morning. And lunch will be set up and you can eat outside on the terrace. Okay, so with that, I'd like to transition the program over to a presentation of our Distinguished Alumni Awards. And this is kind of a really exciting thing that we do every year. We started this Distinguished Alumni Award in 1991 to honor our most esteemed and accomplished alumni from across industry and academia. And since then, we've had the privilege of adding over 106 individuals to the ranks of our distinguished alumni in both electrical engineering and computer science. So today we're honoring 4 of the EECS department's most outstanding former students as this year's distinguished alumni. And I'd like to introduce each of them to you one by one and invite them to come to the podium where they'll receive their award and will be invited to say a few words. Okay, so our first distinguished alumnus joins us over Zoom because he's currently in Jerusalem and couldn't travel to today's ceremony, and we're really happy that he can join us over Zoom. He is Noam NIsan, who's a professor of computer science at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He received his PhD in 1988 under the advising of Professor Richard Karp. And the citation for his award is for fundamental contributions to computational complexity theory and the creation of the field of algorithmic mechanism design. And I'd like to say a few words about Noam before he accepts his award. Okay, so Noam is a member of the board of directors of the National Library of Israel and chairs its subcommittee on digital strategy. He has previously served as the dean of the School of Computer Science and Engineering of the Hebrew University and as a senior researcher in Microsoft and in Google. He's known for his work in communication complexity, pseudo-random number generators, interactive proofs, and algorithmic game theory. And he's credited with coining the phrase algorithmic mechanism design. Professor NIsan has published several books and over 100 research papers. Actually, a book that just came out this year, which is a really wonderful book that I've been able to get a copy of. And his research and papers span computational complexity, economics, and computation. He's won a number of awards, including the Godel Prize, the Knuth Award, and the EECS Prize, and the Rothschild Prize. Today, we honor Noam, as I said, for fundamental contributions to computational complexity theory and the creation of the field of algorithmic mechanism design. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing the presentation, so you should be able to see and hear Noam.
So I don't know if you can hear
Noam.
and see me. Hi.
Okay, so Noam, are you unmuted on your side?
I am unmuted, yes. Can you hear me?
We can't hear you, so we're just going to troubleshoot for a second.
Can you hear me now? Or now?
Whoa, yes.
Now you can hear me?
Very well. So we're just turning the sound down a little bit. We'll just turn the volume down just a little bit, just a little, and then we, oh, that's why it's so loud. Okay, now can you say a few words, Noam?
Okay, so thank you for this honor. So the time I spent in Berkeley as a graduate student in the theory group of computer science, it was really the most, intellectually stimulating period in my life. But it also was very scary intellectually, because the sheer brain power and drive of all the people around me, my fellow graduate students, the postdocs that hung around, my professors, were really amazing. So most of the time I would walk in a feeling that I'm completely inadequate intellectually relative to everyone else that I saw there. So, with the years, I now realize that simply they were all amazingly brilliant, unusually brilliant, people around me. So I'm really glad that to get this prize and feeling maybe a little bit more adequate right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Noam. Noam, we have a nice plaque, which we will be mailing to you. And congratulations.
So actually, I just got the plaque yesterday. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Noam, for your comments. And I should say, I didn't say this earlier, but of the 4 distinguished alumni, we traditionally award 4, 2 in computer science and 2 in electrical engineering. And it doesn't always work out this way, but it did this year. We have 2 in academia and 2 from industry. Okay, so congratulations, Noam. Okay, so now I just go back to the slides, and that should be obvious, but if Eric can come up and put me back on the slides, that would be great. Great, thank you, Eric. All right, and it should advance, but it's not advancing. Yeah, I am clicking on the slide, but let's see. There we go. Okay. Next, it's a pleasure to announce our second awardee in computer science, who is Kimberly Keaton. Kim is a principal engineer at Google, and she earned her bachelor's in computer science and engineering and public policy from Carnegie Mellon University before coming to Berkeley, where she earned a master's in computer science and subsequently a PhD in computer science, advised by David Patterson. She next joined Hewlett-Packard Labs, where her research investigated how to make storage and information systems more manageable, dependable, and easier to use, and how these systems can exploit emerging technologies to improve functionality, performance, and cost. Her work was among the first to automate design of these large-scale storage systems to meet performance and dependability goals, for example, minimizing recovery time and data loss. More recently, she investigated the use of novel memory technologies, including persistent memory and memory disaggregation. In the fall of 2021, Kim joined the systems research at Google Group, working to invent and incubate new technologies to support Google's hardware and software infrastructure. Her work has led to over 60 publications in refereed journals and conferences, and 26 granted US patents, garnering multiple awards and contributing to multiple products. She's done a lot of mentoring as well. She has served as technical program committee chair for multiple top-tier research conferences on computer systems and storage, including USENIX Symposium on Operating Systems Design and Implementation, ACM European Systems Conference, ACM Sigmetrics, and a number of other top-tier conferences. She acts as an industrial advisor to university research groups at UC Berkeley, Carnegie Mellon, and ETH Zurich. She is a fellow of the ACM and the IEEE, and in her spare time, she sings with the Grammy-nominated chorus, Pacific Edge Voices. Today, we honor Kim for leadership in the research and the production of computer data and storage systems, and for mentoring the next generation of computer scientists and engineers. Congratulations, Kim. Let's take one more picture with you. And you can feel free to use this mic if you'd like.
So thank you so much for such a wonderful honor. I'm really humbled to be in the company of such accomplished fellow honorees. Reflecting on what it means to be an alum of the Berkeley EECS department, I realized that there are a number of really important life lessons that I learned during my time at Berkeley. And so my PhD advisor, Dave Patterson, likes to impart wisdom in the form of top 10 lists. And so taking a page from his example, I wanted to share with you my top 5 lessons that I learned at Berkeley. So number 5, don't be afraid to be your whole self. As Claire mentioned, in my spare time, I like to sing. And so when I was an undergraduate and in the first few years of graduate school, I wanted to focus on my studies. So I kind of gave up music at the time, but it just really felt like something was missing. So a couple of years into the program, I met my people, some of which are actually here today. So these are people that were EECS grad students and postdocs and alums by day, but music lovers and theater lovers by night. And so together we put together a number of musical productions. My favorite was a musical version of The Princess Bride. I was part of the Brute Squad, can't you tell? Yeah. And so these folks really showed me that it's important to have non-work interests, both for recharging your batteries, but also kind of unlocking your creativity. And so my fun with music and sort of computer science folks hasn't really stopped since I graduated. For the last few years, I've been in an 80s cover band with faculty members Armando Fox and Mike Jordan. And we even performed in this very room actually once for the prospective graduate student visit day. So there's that intermingling of computer science and music in my life. Okay, number 4, you have the power to make a difference and affect change. I like to say that I chose to come to grad school at Berkeley because I wanted to cultivate a healthy disrespect for authority. And I thought that, somehow Berkeley's history of activism would rub off on me if I came here as a grad student. So one particular example comes to mind. During my time as a graduate student, there were a number of student activism things that happened in the department. So one of them was when I came, students would get feedback pretty much in the form of a one-line letter that they received every semester that basically told them how they were doing, but didn't really give them all that much additional feedback or ideas for how they could go about doing better next time. And so one of my fellow graduate students and I, Nickhil, we decided that maybe we should apply some of the lessons that the industry uses in 360-degree feedback in trying to help to facilitate these conversations. So we put together, a list of areas that maybe students and faculty members could talk about how the student was doing, and also a set of questions so that the students could give some feedback in the opposite direction to the faculty members. And this is, a way that we thought would help to facilitate those conversations. At the same time, Berkeley graduate students were also introducing the Berkeley parent policy for graduate students, and so there was a lot of wonderful activism that was happening during that period. So the bottom line is that, if you see that something should be different, then, you have the ability to make it so. Number 3, everyone's voice matters. And so as we know, not everyone is very well represented in STEM fields, and pretty much everything that we can do in order to increase the diversity of perspectives is going to improve the quality of the work that we can do. And so one of the wonderful experiences that I had as a graduate student, as a woman in computer science and electrical engineering, was the WIXI group that met every Friday for lunch, thanks to Sheila Humphreys, who's also here. And so, free food, graduate students, it's a wonderful recipe for success and wonderful conversation. And so we got together and we could share our experiences with each other, support each other, serve as sounding boards. And it was really, just a wonderful example of some of the great work that Sheila and her team have done over the years to support and champions underrepresented students. And I thank you for that. Number 2, take every opportunity to learn. Berkeley was a place of many firsts for me, arugula, red wine, earthquakes, oral exams. So many learning opportunities, right? But one of the most profound, I think, was the opportunity to be a part of Berkeley computer systems projects like the RAID project and the NOW project and many after that. And so this was a wonderful experience where multiple faculty and their students got together and they studied really, really large scale problems with an interdisciplinary approach. And so not only did you get to learn from your advisor, you got to learn from all kinds of other faculty who had their own areas of expertise, as well as your fellow students who were discovering their own path, essentially. And so it was an amazing learning opportunity. But wait, there's more, right? So in addition to these interactions with faculty and students, there were also the opportunities to interact with folks in industry. We had retreats twice a year where the industrial folks would come and provide feedback on the research, as well as general interesting information about what it's like in the real world, what real world problems look like. But then most importantly, also, they offered words of encouragement to the graduate students who might still be trying to find their way in this crazy business of doing research. And so that since I graduated, I've actually been really fortunate and to be a part of these retreats as an industrial advisor, being able to come back and actually talk with the students and faculty about the work that they're doing here at Berkeley. That brings me to my last life lesson. Number one, everyone is a potential mentor who can teach you something. And if you're lucky, they're a potential friend as well. And so throughout all of these experiences at Berkeley, I've had the wonderful opportunity to have lifelong colleagues and lifelong friends. And I thank them for the wonderful support that they've given me. And thank you again for this award, and go Bears.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for your remarks, and thank you for being such a wonderful mentor yourself. Okay, next up on our distinguished alumni list is Bruce Hayek. Bruce is the Center for Advanced Study professor and head of the Electrical and Computer Engineering department, and the Hoft Chair of Engineering and professor in the Coordinated Science Laboratory at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Bruce received his BS in mathematics and MS in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois before coming to Berkeley. During his PhD study, he minored in mathematics and neuroscience. He worked in the area of stochastic processes, in particular, multiple parameter martingales and Markov processes, under the direction of Professor Eugene Wang. He also maintained an interest in information theory. Following graduation from Berkeley, he returned to the University of Illinois, where he joined the tenure track in electrical and computer engineering, at which time he turned to problems in communication networks, including multiple access, dynamic routing, and flow control. He also contributed to the theory of stochastic methods of global optimization, and in particular, simulated annealing. His research interests include communication networks, auction theory, stochastic analyses, combinatorial optimization, machine learning, information theory, and bioinformatics. Bruce has served as editor-in-chief for the IEEE Transactions on Information Theory and as president of the IEEE Information Theory Society. He received the Aaron D. Weiner Distinguished Service Award of the IEEE Information Theory Society, the IEEE Kobayashi Award for Computer Communication, and the ACM Sigmetrics Achievement Award. He was elected to the US National Academy of Engineering in 1999 for contributions to stochastic systems, communications, and control. Today, we honor Bruce for his prodigious and fundamental research contributions to stochastic processes, information theory, and communications and computer networks, for his sustained and worldwide influence as a beloved teacher and mentor, and for his major leadership role in electrical and computer engineering. Congratulations, Bruce. Invite you to say a few remarks.
Thank you. Hello?
I think it's working.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, I'm incredibly honored and humbled and surprised to receive this award. There are many alumni from the university, much more deserving than I am, but I'll still take this chance to say thank you to my instructors and fellow students that made my visit at the university such a nice experience. So first is my PhD advisor, Eugene Wang, for his incredible accomplishment and insight into stochastic processes and all about life. When I look back and see as a professor now and try to imagine what I looked like as an undergraduate, as a graduate student, I have to cringe. So, and then I enjoyed the good humor and professionalism of Gene Wang and other faculty members, Praveen Varaya and Charlie Desur, and graduate students such as Shankar Sastry, Jean Walrand, and many others. let's see. Well, so Berkeley's just been an incredible place. It's shown leadership through the years, and I've seen how well it's done, and I've admired it from a distance, and it's been an inspiration to me. The good support I had here and the professionalism, I've taken that to be an inspiration and something that I've tried to follow throughout my career. So technology and knowledge continues to grow, and Berkeley is going to always be a part of that. I think there's some urgency here because we need to find a sustainable path for mankind before the human race destroys itself. So there is a race, and so we have to all keep at it. So the alumni, the staff, faculty, and students of this university form a great team. We have a lot of work to do. It's a very important mission, and I'm happy to be part of that team. So I'd like to say, may the force be with us, and go Bears, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce, for your inspiring remarks, and congratulations again. Okay, so we come to our final award presentation. And for that, it's a pleasure to honor Nickhil Jakatdar. Nickhil is the CEO of GenePath Diagnostics. He earned his BE in electrical engineering from the College of Engineering in Pune, India, before coming to Berkeley. He translated his thesis at Berkeley, which focused on the topic of deep submicron photolithography control through inline metrology, into startup Timber Technologies, and was granted 40 patents for the work done there. So this was his thesis work, which was done under the advising of Professor Kostas Spanos in our department. This technology is still being used 20 years later by almost every major semiconductor manufacturer for the real-time measurement of the critical dimensions of their advanced chips. In 2004, he took over as president of MIT-based startup Praesagis. And in 2008, he co-founded and was CEO of Vuclip, a direct-to-consumer mobile video service for emerging markets that enables video to work on 2G and 3G mobile networks, and which can be used in advanced analytics to determine consumer interest by geography and demographics. Vuclip was later acquired by PCCW in Hong Kong and rebranded as View. In 2019, Nickhil became CEO of GenePath Diagnostics, a company looking to democratize healthcare by making the most advanced molecular diagnostic tests for oncology, infectious diseases, and genetic disorders accessible to everyone. GenePath is one of the only companies in the world whose PCR test kits are being used by CLIA labs in the US, as well as labs in India, Africa, Europe, and Southeast Asia. The company has recently released its diagnostic test kits for transplant surgeries, as well as the various blood cancers. He is the founding member of the Bao Institute of Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Leadership in Pune, India, with the goal of fostering an environment and ecosystem to promote entrepreneurship. He has been an investor and advisor to more than 40 startups over the years, and is the recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from the College of Engineering in Pune. We honor Nickhil today for serial entrepreneurship and visionary leadership across several sectors, with profound impact to the microelectronics industry and to the developing world. Congratulations, Nickhil.
Thanks, Claire. The last time I stood in front of so many professors was at my qualifying exam. Right? And that was a good experience. The time before that was my prelim, and I still have scar tissue to show for it. So I have a lot of my family and friends over here. My dad flew in from India for this. One theory is that they're really happy for me and they want to be a part of this great moment. But I have a different theory, which is they're trying to figure out whether it's real, right? This kid who used to skip all his classes to go play soccer games, is this really happening? So they're here to see it, to believe it. We drove up from the South Bay, and my wife wanted to make sure I came here on time. And I said, don't worry, there is free food. I'll absolutely be there on time. Berkeley has been a magical place for me. And I don't use the word lightly. It really has been. I remember when I first got in, thanks to Costas. I think, Costas, you had more confidence in me than I had in myself when I joined. I had a feeling of, do I belong here? But you gave me that comfort, you gave me that belief. And so, thank you for everything you did. And the whole experience from then onwards was amazing. I had Professor Niroidar, Kameshwar Pula from the mechanical engineering department, Sujay. All of them were just amazing guides throughout the process. But what made Berkeley really magical, in my mind, was the open door access to almost any professor across any department. I was telling Professor Patterson earlier that we were stuck at one point with needing a lot of resources. And Shinkwe, who was my colleague in the research group and one of my best friends now, hopefully he's listening in on the call. But he and I went over to meet Professor Patterson, and we said, we hear you're working on this network of workstations. Anything we can do with that? And he sat us down, walked us through what could be done, introduced us to Professor Demel, and he then walked us through what could be done. And that played a key role in what we did. Similarly, at one point, we were stuck in the area of optimization. And we went to Alberto's seminar. He had just been talking about the use of simulated annealing in place and route applications. And we said, great, let's use that and apply it to what we were doing. Again, a lot of help. And this just continued on and on. In the chemistry department, at one point, Costas asked me a question when I told him I wanted to start a company. And he said, do you have a business plan? And I asked him, what does that mean? And he said, exactly. And so I went to the business school, knocked on a professor's door who was going to be teaching a class on entrepreneurship. And I asked him, can I get in the class? And 15 minutes later, I was in the class. That was the first ever, we entered the first ever Berkeley business plan competition, which we ended up winning, but only because of the professor taking pity on me, right? But I think that's what's been magical about Berkeley, access to everybody. And I think, Claire, you spoke about the unified EECS, and I experienced it. I had access to E, I had access to CS, I had access to any other part of Berkeley. And that, to me, is what makes this place magical. And today, the fact that I can call so many of these faculty members friends is a true honor. And so when I heard about this, I had the same feeling of, wow, did I really win this award? I thought it was spam. And I actually moved it into my spam folder. It took me a couple of days before I went back and revisited it because I got a reminder email. So thank you. It means a lot.
Thank you, Nickhil. Thank you, Nickhil. Congratulations, and congratulations to all of our distinguished alumni this morning. While we ask for our next speaker to set up, I'd like to invite our distinguished alumni up to the front because we're going to take one group photo, and then we'll move on with our program this morning. So can we bring Noam up on the screen behind us, Alex? Okay. I'll just stop sharing. I think that's the appropriate thing to do. Oh, good. Noam, if you're here, do you mind unmuting your video? Okay, you may have.
Sorry, hi.
Okay, you're being part of a photo here, Noam.
Okay, great.
Can you put him in a big mode? Okay. Here, now we just have to. Okay, all right, there we go.
Wow, I'm very big, I see on the screen.
Hey, Noam, can you hold your plaque? Thank you. All right, congratulations to all of our distinguished alumni. We are now moving on to the research presentation part of BEARS, which is always a really great event each year. You get to hear of the latest and greatest research from our top-ranked faculty. And it is a pleasure to introduce our first speaker this morning. So while he's setting up, I'm going to introduce him. This is Professor Sanjit Seshia. Welcome, Sanjit. Sanjit is a professor of electrical engineering and computer sciences. His research interests are in formal methods for dependable and secure computing, with a current focus on the areas of cyber-physical systems, computer security, machine learning, and robotics. He has made pioneering contributions to the areas of satisfiability modulo theories, or SMT, SMT-based verification, and inductive program synthesis. He is co-author of a widely used textbook on embedded cyber-physical systems and has led to the development of technologies for cyber-physical systems education based on formal methods. Today, Professor Seshia will present a vision for a new generation of design automation techniques, facilitating the computer-aided design of safe and robust AI CPS in a manner similar to that enabled today by tools for the design automation of reliable integrated circuits. Please welcome Professor Seshia.
Thank you, Claire, for that kind introduction. And hi, everyone. Thanks for all of you being here. So I'm really excited to speak about the topic of design automation for autonomous intelligent cyber-physical systems. This is a topic on which I've been working on for several years with a set of amazing faculty colleagues, students, and postdocs here at Berkeley. And so let me start out with this presentation by telling you about what, are we good? Okay. Okay, we'll pause there. We good? All right, thank you. Okay, so let me start out by telling you about what cyber-physical systems are. Okay, so cyber-physical systems, or CPS, are integrations of computation with physical processes, and they're all around us, right? In domains as varied as transportation, energy systems, healthcare, factory automation, and much more. And one of the trends that we have seen over the past decade, just like many other areas, is the growing use of machine learning and more broadly of artificial intelligence in CPS, including in safety critical autonomous CPS. The area of autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, exemplifies this trend where machine learning, including deep learning, is being used throughout the autonomy stack in tasks like perception, prediction, planning, control, and more. And this use of AI is only projected to grow. So we've all been hearing about this in the press, and some of us will remember going back 6-7 years ago, there were very rosy predictions about the technology in self-driving vehicles and the fact that by 2020, we're going to see many, many of these, millions of these cars on the road, right? And this was a not uncommon headline to see at the time, right? Actually, what's interesting is the subtitle here, which is the greatest danger that they will be too safe, right? 2020 came and went, and reality hit, and pessimism set in, right? And unfortunately, we've seen many of these kinds of headlines. And what that points to is that there is a lack of guarantees for safety, robustness, and broadly dependability of this technology. Now, I don't want to minimize the challenge of designing these systems. These are complex systems, right? And it is not an easy task. But given their promise, we've got to find a way forward. And so for inspiration, I look to another class of complex systems that we've had some success in designing to some degree of assurance, right? And this is the area of integrated circuits and microprocessors, where we have a design flow, like the one you see here, that goes from a high-level design in a programming language down to a fabricated chip, where we have some assurance that the chip actually satisfies its specifications. And this is enabled by a design flow supported by tools and languages, technologies like logic synthesis and optimization and simulation and verification and physical design. Many of these things came from here, from Berkeley, which laid the foundation not only in terms of the theory and tools, but also the EDA industry. Okay, and so the question here is, we have all of these tasks in the design process, starting from modeling and high-level design, specification, verification, validation, synthesis, mapping, testing, and so on. And so how do we replicate this for this area of AI CPS? So I'm going to speak about a piece of this agenda today, something that I call the Verified AI Research Agenda, which is about creating a design flow for AI CPS that's supported by theory, techniques, and tools that it can ensure the safety, dependability, and robustness of the system. And this is an agenda that we've been working on for several years. We wrote a position paper about this, listed at the bottom, about 6 years ago now, and a revision is going to appear in the communications of the ACM later this year. So for the rest of my presentation, I'm going to focus on these things. I'm going to tell you about two key technologies that we've developed here over the past few years. They're called Scenic and Verify. I'm going to illustrate how we've deployed them, talking about two industrial case studies, and then I'll conclude with some ongoing and new directions. All right, so our work is rooted in this subfield called formal methods, which also underpins the design flow for integrated circuits. And I think it's going to be a key enabler for AI CPS as well. So what is it that you do? First of all, it lets you do precise programmatic modeling and design of both the system and the environment in which it's supposed to operate. And you can see they're very complex systems, complex environments for this class of systems. It allows you to do mathematical specification of requirements and metrics, develop scalable algorithms for the various tasks in the design flow, and also to develop methodologies for provably robust system design. And we've been fortunate to be supported by several sponsors over the past several years to do this work. Okay, so let me tell you about the technologies. So Scenic is where we start. It's a high-level probabilistic programming language for modeling systems and their environments. It's supported on the back end by the Verify toolkit, which supports all the other tasks. They're both open source systems. We've been have deployed them and have been working with industry, academia, and the government for the last few years, and really trying to develop a community that can share best practices, scenarios, and metrics for this class of systems and develop a corpus of tools and data. So a little bit more about Scenic. So like I said, Scenic is used for environment modeling, but it can also be used to generate data in a systematic way that you can get some assurances, because all learning depends on data. Okay, it's a probabilistic language. That is, every Scenic program defines a distribution over environment scenarios, and it has several use cases. So let me show you a snippet of a Scenic program. So that's what it looks like. It's an embedded DSL in Python, but more readable. And this particular program is modeling the scenario of a badly parked car. Every variable in this program is a random variable. And the right-hand side expressions are ways of defining the distribution of those variables, both implicitly and explicitly. Okay? When you connect the scenic system to a backend renderer or simulator, in this case, the rendering engine of the GTA 5 game, every time you run the program, you get a new image. This is a purely static scenario. Now, I'm going to show you how you can take that same program of the badly parked car and now add dynamics to it. So now there are two cars, the ego vehicle, the autonomous vehicle, from whose viewpoint the scenario is being viewed, and an environment badly parked car vehicle. Both of them have behaviors. And what's going to happen is the environment vehicle is just driving in its lane while the badly parked car is going to pull into its path as it approaches. Okay, so again, this scenic program, when you connect to a backend renderer, the open source simulator Carla, every time you run it, you get a new scenario showing the badly parked car pulling into its path. Okay, and this way you can define a diversity of scenarios in simulation. And you can then support it with the backend algorithms in the Verify toolkit for verification, debugging, and synthesis. The key idea here is this notion of a semantic feature space where all the algorithms operate on. And this has also been applied, connected to a variety of simulation systems across many domains in CPS. Okay, so now let me tell you more concretely what you can do with this. And I'm going to describe a full design iteration with Scenic and Verify for the problem of autonomous airplane taxiing. This is work that we did in the DARPA Assured Autonomy program, where our team is led by Claire Tomlin, and this is a collaboration with Boeing. Okay, so what Boeing did was they provided us with a challenge problem, a neural network-based system called TaxiNet, which is using deep learning for autonomous taxiing. So this is an aircraft where on the right wing of the aircraft, if you look at the picture up here, there's a camera mounted, and the image from that camera goes into a neural network, which estimates its deviation from the center line. That's called the cross-track error. And that goes into a conventional controller. And the specification is that the plane must track the center line to within 1.5 meters plus or right, left or right. So here's an example. This is in the X-plane simulator that Boeing uses, where the plane is doing a pretty good job of keeping to the center line in spite of all the skid marks and other artifacts. Okay, so what we did was we first modeled this in Scenic. We specified the safety requirement. And then we ran our algorithms for falsifying the system. This is essentially finding corner case situations where the system violates the safety specification. Once we found those failures, we had an semi-automated technique for doing debugging and root causing, which then fed into the next phase where we wanted to improve the neural network by retraining to eliminate those failures. And that produced a more robust system, but these classes of systems have to operate in very unpredictable, uncertain environments, right? So we also added in runtime assurance to be able to deal with unexpected situations at runtime. Okay, so let me tell you step by step how that works. So step one, we talked to the Boeing engineers and came up with a Scenic program, not too large, that models the key semantic features that they expected to vary, like time of day, the type of cloud cover, whether there's rain and how much rain there is, and where the plane is on the runway and how it's oriented. Okay, so all of that is described in this compact Scenic program with its distributions. And then we ran falsification. For this, we actually looked to techniques from traditional design automation where temporal logic is widely used. We adapted that for this setting. So this particular expression essentially says that after a transient phase, the centerline tracking error should fall within 1.5. We turn that into a cost function. And then that cost function is then used with an optimizer, which tries to minimize the cost function, searching over the space of possible behaviors. And if it drives the value below 0, that's an unsafe behavior. Okay, and so automatically the Verify toolkit found about 4,000 simulations, really limited by our computational, the time we had to run these experiments. And to our surprise, nearly half of them violated the safety condition. and 9% left the runway entirely. So here's an example. Early morning, low light conditions, light rain. The neural network loses track of the center line and just proceeds to drive off the runway. Okay. So that's the kind of thing we do not want to happen, right? So first step, we need to root cause this. And for this, we have a variety of techniques to try to understand and localize the error. In particular, we found that the behavior was sensitive to time of day. And that's shown here on this plot where the x-axis is the time of day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The y-axis is this cost function I talked about earlier, where if it's positive, the system is safe. If it's negative, the system is unsafe. So you see early morning, it's reliably unsafe. Okay, late morning, early afternoon seems to work fine. Again, mid-afternoon, it's again showing unsafe behavior. And then late evening, again, unsafe behavior. Okay, so what's happening here? Well, in the mid-morning, early afternoon hours, you get nice, crisp, bright images. Okay, there's no problem in finding the center line. Early morning, we already saw, right? That's going to be dark conditions. But mid-afternoon, what's interesting is you have these shadowing effects, which throw off the neural network, right? And our system was able to automatically identify this. In fact, this was just bias in the data set that Boeing collected. They just chose a particular time of day where the images look great, okay? And so follow-up experiments with Boeing confirmed that this was the root cause. All right, so what do we do next? Well, we use those counterexamples we find algorithmically to retrain the system, okay? And we improved it significantly. And so here's an example, exactly identical environment for the top and bottom. The neural network at the top, which is the original, drives off the runway. The one at the bottom, which is our retrained version, does a lot better, okay? And what's nice is our scenic program is a model of the conditions under which we have assurances, right? And so, yes, in reality, the system is likely to go into environments where those assurances don't hold. But the good thing is, at least for those environments, we've made it robust, okay? And that's what we see here. But further, we can take that model in the scenic program and generate a runtime monitor that can monitor the environment to make sure that the system is operating in an environment where it can assure safety. And if it doesn't, then it can switch to a fallback, a safe fallback. So that's what you're going to see here, right? So in this case, if you watch the rectangle up here at the top right, it says trusted environment. It's probably a little hard to read, but it's detected that it's an environment where it can operate safely, and the plane is proceeding fine. Now it's going to get to a point in the runway where you'll see these little white patches on the side. And those are artifacts that it hasn't seen yet in training. They weren't modeled. And so as it gets there, our system automatically detects that it's essentially getting out of distribution. It says the untrusted environment, and it switches in real time to a safer but lower performance controller. Okay. All right. So hopefully I've told you there how we can use these tools to do this full design iteration. And this is a system that was already designed, so we're essentially analyzing and improving it. And all of that was in simulation, which is a technology that is being more widely used in this domain. But the question remains, what about the gap between simulation and reality, right? And how do we transfer these results over? So that's what I'm going to tell you about next, okay? So the questions that we asked ourselves in this case study were, first of all, you did all this analysis and simulation, we found safe and unsafe behaviors. How well do they transfer to the real world? Okay, number one. Number two, can we actually design the tests for the real world using this great tool chain that we've got at design time and simulation, right? Because real world testing is tedious, it's expensive, it's, you need to be careful about how you use your resources. Okay, so this is work that we did jointly with the American Automobile Association, which operates one of the largest A/B testing facilities in the country called the Momentum Station, and LG, which provided the simulator. Okay, so the overall approach was we started with the simulated world, the scenic program modeling scenarios and our safety metrics, ran falsification and verify, got a whole bunch of test cases, very similar to the Boeing case study. And then we did a process of test case selection, where we down selected to a handful of test cases that we could run on the road at Momentum Station multiple times. collected data from that, and then iterated the process. Okay, and so in particular, we chose scenarios that are important from multiple viewpoints, especially those that involve vulnerable road users like pedestrians and bicyclists. Right, this is a class where we are seeing not just for autonomous vehicles, but for other vehicles as well. Unfortunately, the accidents and incidents seem to be increasing. Okay, so here's a diagram of the particular scenario we ran. If you focus on the right, that's a map of momentum where the autonomous vehicle has this blue path. It starts at the bottom right corner and it ends up at the top right over here. So that's what it has to do. Right over here at the turn, where it makes a right turn, there's a yield sign. There's also a crosswalk where a pedestrian dummy, an actuated dummy, is set up. And that pedestrian is supposed to start at the yellow dot and end up at the red dot. But its behavior is such that it's going to hesitate in the middle of the road around the orange dot. Okay, and so we wanted to make this a scenario that has really a distribution and variations. And so in particular, the pedestrian model in Scenic had a bunch of random variables that had to do with when the pedestrian starts, where the pedestrian stops, for how long the dummy stops, and so on. All right, and this was an autonomous vehicle running Baidu's Apollo software. And so again, we ran falsification, again, automatically about 1,200, 1,300 simulations. A few of those violated the safety property. Here is a visualization of all the simulations where the cold colors are unsafe, blue or purple. The warm colors are safe. And then we selected test cases of three kinds. Ones that were robustly safe. So you have a cluster of orange or yellow dots. Those that are marginally safe, where you've got a safe behavior, but if you perturb it a little bit, it may get unsafe. And then something that is reliably unsafe. Okay, and then these were literally a handful of test cases that we then ran on the track. And through this test selection process, we found there was a reasonable correlation between what we saw in simulation and the road. I mean, there's a lot of differences in how you set up the pedestrian model in simulation versus what the dummy can do on the track and geometry and slope and things like that. But what we found was over half of the scenarios that were unsafe in simulation also ended up being unsafe on the road. And the vast majority of those that were safe in simulation were safe on the road. And here's an example of one of those that was unsafe in simulation. We redid it on the track. There you see me with my students, and the dummy will start moving. Now the car actually sees the dummy, right, with its neural network. And it does it a couple of times, but it drives and hits the dummy anyway, right? And so, so what was going on there? Again, you have to go to a process of root causing. And so this root causing is a difficult job with these complex systems because there are so many components and you could have stopped the error at multiple points, but it seems to have started with perception, right? If you see here the visualization, the car's coming up on the turn, there'll be a yellow box that is the pedestrian that it sees. It puts a fence that it has to stop, and then somehow it loses the yellow box and drives into it, okay? So anyway, so that was that case study where we've shown we can go to real world testing as well. And so what we've been developing over the last many years is really this ecosystem of design tools for AI CPS rooted at in these open source projects, but supporting these multiple use cases. And I think we've gotten to the point where we can support the full design cycle, right? From modeling and high level design to verification, testing, synthesis, and then runtime monitoring and back. Okay. All right, let me conclude in a few minutes with some ongoing and new directions. So CPS is a broad field and it touches upon many other fields. I'm going to give you two examples. This is work that's being led by our student, graduate student, Edward Kim. On the left, you see the use of Scenic for programmatic training of reinforcement learning agents in real-time strategy games. This particular one is Google's soccer simulator, where the agents that are controlling each player are trained through reinforcement learning, where the environment team is modeled with Scenic. And what we've shown is that using Scenic, we're able to actually train these agents much more effectively and efficiently than through traditional methods. On the right, what you see is another application, getting into the metaverse, I guess, where we are showing how we can use Scenic to train humans to play these virtual reality esports in a more systematic fashion. But also, I think my real interest in this is really seeing how we can train humans to work with autonomous CPS in various contexts. And I think technology can be useful for that. Finally, let me conclude with this relatively new project, the DARPA Logics project that we've just started. And this project is taking a much more holistic view of the design of this class of CPS. It's looking at essentially starting from scratch as opposed to taking an already designed system and analyzing it and patching it, right? How do we start from scratch and design not only high performance systems, but also safe and robust systems by combining human expert insight with these computational engines that are based on AI and machine learning and more. And this involves many Berkeley faculty that you see here on the slide, as well as some of our alumni. All right, with that, I'm going to stop. Thank you so much for your attention. Please feel free to contact me, and I would love to take questions.
For the simulation where you had where the car was turning and hit the pedestrian, was that using a LiDAR system?
Yes, it was. Yeah, the car was using LiDAR. Yeah.
And it still lost track of the pedestrian?
Yes, it did. Yeah. And so I think the issue there might have been couple-fold, right? And again, this is all speculation because we don't know the internals of Baidu's system. But the LiDAR was mounted at the top. And when the pedestrian dummy got too close to the car, I don't think it was getting clear enough view. That was one. Secondly, I think the prediction seems to have also been off, not just the perception. And so clearly it lost track of the dummy, but it should have predicted that the dummy that it saw the pedestrian is going to move forward, and it didn't have that. So I think some combination of that.
It seems like the largest problems happen at intersections. Has anybody considered having cooperative intersections?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there are people have considered that. There are faculty on campus like Professor Praveen Baraya and Murat Archak and a number of others who are looking into this. In fact, we did, along with Professor Baraya, we did do a simulation-based study of this. And there was an Uber collision that happened at an intersection. This was not the fatal one, but there was a one where there was a lady who was taking an unprotected left turn, and there was an Uber autonomous car that couldn't see the left turning car because of a wall of cars in between where the intersection was congested, and there was a collision. But of course, the intersection knew that this person was making a left turn, and the Uber car is coming at 45 miles per hour in the right lane. So we replicated that sort of intelligence, and we showed that it could reliably stop this collision. So I think that's definitely a technology that has to be integrated for improving safety.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
While Angjoo is getting set up, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Professor Angjoo Kanazawa. Angjoo works in the area of computer vision, computer graphics, and machine learning. She's one of the world's experts on perception of 3D and understanding of the 3D environment around us. From images and video. She's one of the world's experts on understanding the motion and behavior of humans. She's going to speak to us today about a combination of the two, 3D human perception. She's also a research scientist.
Not anymore. Sorry.
Oh,
not anymore.
Not anymore.
Old, sorry.
Oh. And is one of our superstar junior faculty. So I'm delighted to introduce to you Angjoo Kanazawa.
Great, thanks for the. great. Thanks for the introduction. That sounds good. Okay, great. All right. So today I'm going to talk about perceiving humans in the 3D world. It's a perfect transition from the previous talk because we all know that it's very important. So the premise of my research builds on the fact that we live in a world that is 3D and dynamic, full of life, with humans interacting with each other in the environment, with animals and trees and all these things. As we approach, a society where AI is fully integrated with society, it's really important that we can reliably perceive, interpret, and interact with humans in the 3D world. So this is a very important topic, but the existing non-rigid 3D solution is a very complicated one, actually. So you might know motion capture from your movies. So you can wear these like suits and markers and put them in a environment or rigged environment in mocap. Then you can actually get their good motion. But non-rigid 3D perception is very difficult because you can't just rely on geometry. But the problem with these approaches, which is quite mature, is that there's so much more to the world than green screen. And so much of my research focuses on doing this 3D perception of people from images in the wild, which is like a jargon that we use to talk about a casual video, like the one that's in your iPhone or on the internet. Okay, so I've been working on single view 3D human mesh recovery with my colleagues, where you can take a single image and recover this kind of mesh representation, which has a pretty low dimensional representation of people from images, including those that are complicated and cluttered. We've also extended this to video. Now, just a very brief understanding of how we do this, particularly for humans. We actually have this model of human bodies that graphics artists or graphics researchers built from many data. Specifically, what this is a PCA of people's shapes. So it kind of captures like the different variations of people's height and shape with a fixed articulation. And then you also express the articulation by means of joint angles, which is a very common method that animators use in these Pixar movies to animate their movies characters. So together you can get any shape and any pose of people in any view, and we're always taking a picture, so we should throw in a camera in there. So okay, so that is like the idea, a prior on what the human body shape is like. The second thing is the prior or like specification of what the kinematic structure is like. And if you add them all together, this adds up to an 85-dimensional representation that we want to recover from every single person. Okay, so every single one of you, from my perspective, has a unique 85 number that describes your current pose and shape, roughly. Anyway, so how do we actually use this model? So we use these deep learning approaches that give you very reliable 2D key points, like shown on the left. And the idea is to deform or fit, search for the parameters of this human model that when you project it, the 3D points, the 3D joints go to the corresponding 2D joints. So I'm going to play this animation from the beginning. So that's initialization. And then you kind of do this optimization to make it fit properly. And of course, this is a very underdetermined problem, and an inverse problem. So you have to put a lot of priors, and you can also do this from using deep learning, which kind of encapsulate this kind of priors. But that's really a brief look into the idea, so you have some ideas. But it has a lot of potential for content creation, or metaverse, or whatever you want to call it, or all of your online activities where you want to do these things. But to ordinary artists, of course, there's that topic that we were just discussing about, which is to anticipate human behavior. If you can perceive people from like a set of video and predict what's going to happen in the future, which we've experimented with, preliminary results for these specific acrobatic motions that we can do, it would help these autonomous systems reason about people and plan around them. Of course, being able to do this from your everyday iPhone has a lot of potential in making medical diagnosis and treatment more accessible, which today requires patients to go into huge hospitals which have this motion capture setup. And lastly, but not least, this ability to learn to act from visual observation is a very fundamental nature that builds in us. So this is a baby who's watching Rocky. And clearly, the screen is two-dimensional, but the baby is perceiving the 3D motion of the actors behind this video and can imitate it. And so we actually tried this kind of idea with my robotics colleagues. So we use our approach to perceive people in 3D in a kinematic way. And then we use this as the target to train a policy in simulation to imitate this. And so we got this Atlas robot to dance from watching YouTube videos. Okay, there's also an exciting direction in animals, which follows a similar path, but it's a lot harder because there's much less data. And so there isn't that many models like the human body model that we just talked about. There's no very good, reliable 2D pose, key point detectors. So animals is a really interesting domain which requires much less supervision. So we need to develop like unsupervised or self-supervised methods to perceive them in 3D. Building upon these approaches from humans, and it has actually a lot of applications in basic sciences like neuroscience and biomechanics, robotics. You can also print them after you reconstructed your animals. And so vision and graphics is a really fun area. Okay, so today I want to talk about what are the recent developments, because this is basically kind of like a story that I've been telling. So what's up with the new stuff? Okay, so the things that we're thinking about right now is that we can kind of perceive people, by themselves, in an unobstructed, reasonably clear view. But the problem is that the world is really not just humans. There's the environment and objects that humans interact with. And so we started looking into how to model the relationship between the humans and the objects, which increases the number of unknowns, but actually reduces some of the possible solutions if you can actually reason about them, because they have to be consistent. Okay, so then we've also done it on hands and objects interaction. There's also this other direction of wanting to model the appearance from a single image. So this is a result from a single image. So taking a single image, we've developed algorithms that can directly output these geometries that are beyond these simplified models. So that's kind of going on also. But today I want to talk about the other two directions that we're thinking about. So first is this idea from performance capture to behavior capture. And the second is that of synthesizing motion and behavior, which is related to prediction. So let's go to the first one. So I think what's happening is that pre-2016, we had to put the people into this like green screen situations. We developed algorithms that really, improves upon this setup to make it work on any images on the internet. But then I think what's really next is to understand long-term human behavior so that we can learn about what people are doing with their environment, or how they use the environment, or what are they doing in the long-term reasoning that's just beyond these 3 seconds. And that I'm calling the behavior capture as opposed to performance capture, because performance capture is something that actor wants to kind of incorporate into the virtual world. So they act in front of their cameras, right? But there's like really not that many interesting videos where people are doing things in front of the camera without any other humans and without any other things that's happening. And so we realized that once you move on to storytelling domains like movies or TV shows, current approaches really struggle because humans are not always visible like in a similar scale. Especially when it comes to movies, there's a lot of close-up scales. And there's lots of occlusions and truncations and sudden shot changes. So that's the one thing that we realized. So if you look at all of these videos, there's a shot change, and it's done really, really smoothly that we don't really perceive it as like a sudden interruption. But that's because the movie teller is really telling us to perceive the scene from multiple viewpoints, thereby giving you more information about what's happening. And this transition happens so quickly, so naturally in our brain. But there's a lot of shot changes. Okay, and then current algorithms actually treat these as separate scenes. So here's another scene from Friends. So that's one shot, and that's another shot. And they're not per pixelized smooth. And so these computer vision algorithms clip them and be like, oh, this is one completely different shot and another completely different shot, which in fact they're actually telling a longer story that goes beyond these two shots sequences. And we realized that this is actually, so current approaches treat these shots independently. So if the people are more or less visible, it looks okay. But when there's like a lot of, up close shots or, from behind, a lot of the recognition algorithms break down because there's no faces, you only see the back. There's not that much features to detect and stuff like this. But then we realized that these shots actually depict the same underlying scene. So they're not a nuisance, but they're actually a multi-view signal. It's like as if you had multiple views of the same scene. I mean, the scene might have moved a little bit, but it's actually the same. So you can just incorporate this idea and solve for a single human that satisfies both sequences. And that really gives us much more robust way of perceiving these things. And that's more natural because that's how we really understand these videos that tell stories. So that's improvement. And it really is simple. Like I was telling you about the optimization method, which you do for each sets of sequences. But all you do is at the point of the shot change, which we can detect pretty easily, we just make sure that the people in the canonical coordinate frame, not in the view space, have the same pose. Then we can get this kind of very consistent 3D human reconstruction that's more robust for movies. So that's one direction when I mean by understanding storytelling behavior kind of images of videos. But then again, perceiving behavior requires long-range observation, which means you also need to track people over time. Shot change is one issue that comes for it, but occlusion is another. And so let's look at this video where there's lots of people, exercising, and there's a lot of human-to-human occlusion. So tracking this is really challenging. I guess I'm not showing the original video, but now we're developing approaches that can track people well with 3D representations with my colleague here at Jakatdar Malik here. So really the core idea here is that the tracking is better done in 3D. Why? Because when people occlude each other, which happens all the time, in 2D, it's very difficult to disambiguate, which person is which person, and you make a mistake and you swap the identity. But then if you can perceive people in 3D, I mean, in 2D they overlap, but in 3D they don't overlap because they exist in different, Z dimensions. And this is in fact, how we would, track people along with other cues like motion. Another thing is that if you are able to recover 3D representation of people, that means you also have correspondences, which means you also have these, you also know that all of these different points in the images correspond to the same points in, on this body model, which means it actually gives you this, viewpoint and pose invariant appearance embedding, which kind of looks like this. This is like the unwrapped version of the texture map. And so, this is a 3D appearance feature that is invariant to viewpoint and correspondence that we can also extract. And so the idea is that on top of these pose method, we also extract the appearance, and then we use this as a 3D cue and just do a very simple bipartite matching to solve for people. And it works quite well. It's very robust, even when people are heavily occluded. Okay, and then we made even more try on this, which is that, if you're actually tracking people, you are also able to make predictions of where people are going to go. Okay, and then actually modeling this, prediction in 2D is hard because it's nonlinear because of the projection. But if you're in 3D, people move basically in constant velocity assumption works really well. And so the idea here is that we simply add on to this idea. So, from some frames, we track people, we aggregate their pose information with their appearance information. And then when there's a new frame that we want to see where the people are, maybe this person got occluded by, hiding behind something, but you can still make a prediction using a linear regression or just really fitting a linear model on their XYZ coordinates, basically, which works quite well. And then you can see what the observation was in that particular frame, and then assign which one is the most likely one based on your prediction. If you don't have this, when people occluded, previous model would assume that the people just stay in place, but this thing can actually move people, so they can actually match people when they come out of occlusion or something like this. So tracking videos are very difficult to see. So I'm going to show you. Let's look at the one with the color. So we're going to look at this soccer player with this red mark. Okay, and then let's do this again. Okay, all right. That red guy over here. Let's look at our method. Starts off as purple and then correctly tracking that the person is purple. This one started off as green and then now became blue. This one also started as green and then couldn't, it swapped the identities because of these occlusions. So this is just like, showing that this prediction approach allows people, our method, to be really robust against these heavy occlusions, that these 2D, these are bottom or 2D state-of-the-art approaches. They're really not robust at doing this from appearance alone. Okay, and so here's like, more results. And here we're only showing the top just for the thing. Okay, all right. Okay, I have like 8 minutes, but okay. So I think once we can capture these people more, the nice thing about the video is that it really gives us what people did in the future, or it gives you this information, long-range information of people's behavior, which means you can actually use this to predict what people are likely going to do, or build a model of their motion. So looking at this particular pose, what is the most likely pose before and after? For these ballistic motions, we can actually make these predictions. We also tried to do this from video by predicting the motion. But so we've been doing this kind of analysis or modeling motion and predicting motion in conditions of other things because we're interested in understanding motion better. And in line of this work, we also have this fun work where I have to play the music here. I don't know if the music is allowed to play here. So let's see. Oh no. Oh, here we go. So given this music, okay, I'm going to mute myself. But basically, we developed this approach that can dance to music. Condition on the music, it basically generates the corresponding motion. So we've been doing this kind of a multimodal cue from audio to motion, from like images to motion. And so this is our latest work that we're going to present at CVPR. So you all know that our dear colleague Jitendra Malik, over the pandemic, was on Conan O'Brien's show.
Okay, I think I've given a slightly more serious answer, which is, I think it's to do with
okay. So Jitendra wasn't actually on Conan. This is a fake video. This is not a real video. But you may have noticed that, oh, maybe you might have believed what I said because Conan is in fact reacting to what Jitendra is saying. Okay, so this is actually a study into this non-verbal communication that people excel at. This is very innate characteristics in us. And the being able to model this will allow us to do richer human-machine interactions. And so the idea is to model this dyadic two-person conversation. So from a video, we extract this motion. You know what? I really should have allowed for audio, but oh, here we go. Share computer sound. Let's see if that works. Maybe. Okay, well, people are saying something. We reconstructed their face motion. And then the goal is to output a listener's face motion. Okay, and by basically like nodding, smiling, you want to smile when there's a joke, you want to nod solemnly when there's like, serious things being said. So really the creative aspect of this paper work was that the student during COVID realized that there's a lot of online interviews that actually shows you us in Zoom format. And this is a really nice thing because it kind of gives you this frontal-facing conversation between two people, which wasn't really available before COVID. So we took advantage of this situation and then collected this data from the internet. And then
my children are adults. They're being very patient.
So we got lots of these conversations. We reconstructed the people, got the audio. And then that really serves as our training data to train, how to react to when the speaker is saying something. Okay. Yeah. And all right. And then, So the property is that, there's a lot of cues when it comes. So, I think even if you don't hear the audio, if you hear the motion, maybe, you can tell that they're laughing or it's not sort. But obviously you really want the audio also. And in the future, it would be really interesting to incorporate semantics and language. But so we developed an approach that can digest two modalities. And then the thing is that the output, there's many different ways to answer conversation. I mean, it's not a deterministic function, right? There's many different ways to respond. And so this model should similarly be able to output multiple responses. And so that's basically, without getting too much into the details, we enable this by using an architecture that is cross-modal, attends to both inputs. And we learned this discretized the latent space. And because it's discrete, you can predict the next motion in terms of these discrete codebooks, which allows you to actually sample different motions. And therefore, we can actually make it do these multiple possible futures. Anyway, here's some results.
You know what? It does have a very oregano soupçon to it. So that's what I'm going to say it is.
So we're generating the face, the 3D face, and then we go from this 3D face to the pixels using these deepfake technologies like Pix2Pix.
You know what?
We've done a very good job, I think, in the last couple of months, focusing on what reform of...
Serious?
We've done a very good job, I think.
You standing on that stage and all you hear is the echo of your voice because there's no one there.
Nobody there.
No one.
Okay.
You standing on...
All right. So then we've done a lot of evaluations on this because using strong nearest neighbor baseline is very important. And so we've done so many approaches, so many baseline comparisons, and did experiments with people to evaluate the results. Okay, so in summary, 3D provides robustness against truncation and occlusion that allows long-range tracking and understanding of people's behaviors, which will also allow us to do these things like modeling social interactions. And so there's a lot of advances in this field, but there's a lot more unsolved problems. And I want to thank my students and collaborators for this work, and then my also lab, which grew in this past 2 years. Okay, thank you.
I think we're going to skip questions because we're running behind and I don't want to keep people from lunch.
Perfect.
So please,
happy to take questions over lunch. All right, thank you.
I won't repeat everything, but this is Professor Eric Paulos, who works in the area of human-computer interaction, design, computing. He is the acting director of the Jacobs Institute. He's been very involved in a number of research directions. including design and fashion, computing in the urban environment, a number of other areas. And I'm going to hand things over to Professor Paulos here.
Okay, great. Something came up. All right, I got to set this up. 30 seconds. And I'll take off my mask to make it easier here for everyone. Is this coming through? All right, something's come up. I'm not sure why you're seeing this, but okay. To be decided why that came up that way. All right, great. Okay, so, all right, I'm going to talk to you about human-computer interaction. My name is Eric Paulos, as you heard, and some of the things that I work on with my grad students and colleagues, we think about how humans interact with technology. All of you are familiar with this. You touch devices, you touch technology. I'm going to try to tell you a little story about how we get motivated by other disciplines, how we work with design, how we approach this space, and hopefully how, oh, I know what's going to happen here, but I think I can make this a little better for everyone. Maybe. Okay. And how we can think about what the next level or the next kind of direction for human-computer interaction. So as you saw briefly, I used to be an undergrad here. You would also notice as there's less hair, that means it's going on in time. Later, I was a graduate student here. I worked with Professor John Canny on telepresence. Some of my thesis work was really building these internet telepresence robots that you're probably familiar with, but this actual picture was taken right here in the WAS. So many years ago, Berkeley was ahead in thinking about how people would interface with technologies and how telepresence could be a tool for social interaction and engagement. Later, I was at Intel Research, where I did work in sort of urban computing and mobile computing. And then later I was a faculty at Carnegie Mellon. I got the chance to come back here and be faculty as well as electrical engineering, computer science, and the Berkeley Center for New Media. We do a lot of different projects. A lot of them are very physical. There's lots of tangible interaction design and critical design, and I'll try to talk through a couple different themes. There's not really a lot of time to go into all projects in detail, but I want to talk through that. I direct this hybrid ecologies lab, and for me, this idea of hybrid is really important. It's this idea, the hybrid or the meeting of two media is a moment of truth and revelation from which a new form is born. And hopefully many of you draw on hybrid in your own practice, be it hybrid disciplines, hybrid perspectives, hybrid materials, all of that is of interest to us. And this ecologies are, in some sense, the scientific analysis and study of interactions among organisms and their environment, such as the interactions organisms have with each other and their abiotic environment. And maybe you'll see some elements of that in this work. I'm going to just give you the cheat sheet to how we work and how we do research. We like to identify some core metaphors that are in a field. We'll recognize what those metaphors exclude, either a technology, a community, an interaction, and then we basically invert that metaphor, bring that marginalized conversation to the center, and we build alternatives that embody that inversion. Sometimes the scope of work is pretty broad. The idea is that obviously sometimes we work on small interaction designs, but also I think all of us as humanists want to question and provide support for a broad range of really big challenging problems. They're actually wicked problems, these ideas of the environment or economies or food or education. So these are very hard problems, and sometimes they don't lend themselves immediately towards engineering approaches. And one of the things that you can do is you can think about design. And with design, and I'm not going to be able to give a whole kind of lecture about design, but often these are words associated with design when people are talking about design. And I'm offering this kind of juxtaposition of words here on the right. And the claim is that I'd like to think more about not problem solving, maybe sometimes problem making, pointing directions, finding opportunities. Instead of in the service of industry, perhaps in the service of society, designing for production, maybe designing things to debate or bring forth an important ethical issue, thinking more about citizens, and often things that sometimes make us think. And these are sort of critical things of how we want to work as researchers. One thing that we do is we use a tool called critical design, and I'll just give you in very broad strokes. The idea is that we're here at the present, and there's some future state. There's the set of all possible things. This is, we might colonize Mars, like all kinds of things are possible. Inside of that is sort of what is more plausible. So things that are a little bit more, okay, that's more plausible that might actually happen. And even more narrow is the probable. We could debate it, but things like maybe self-driving cars, things like that, very probable. And what critical design does is it lets us pivot out of that sort of more narrow discussion into these preferable designs. And sometimes it's a little obtuse from how we would normally operationalize our thinking. And sometimes these designs are not intended to be an object you might purchase or immediately find in the future. The places where we do this, I'm just going to give you it in some broad strokes. The Citrus Invention Lab is one of these locations. Let's see if we can move this so it's not blocking all the title slides. The Citrus Invention Lab, which is the first makerspace in the UC system. It's 10 years old as of next month, and it's a great space that allows for open collaboration. Another, the kinds of projects that go on there are student run as well as research, everything from looking at new prosthetics, playful experiences. There was a really cool Lioness smart vibrator startup that came out of the lab. And this is a space to really, I say, come for the 3D printer, but stay for the community. So sometimes people just come in because they want to cut something on a laser cutter, but in reality, we also let them take 3D printers out to their dorms or cafes, and you can work remotely. We're trying to really think about making very broadly and what that can be. The other mention was to Jacobs Hall, which for those of you that are physically here, this direction, this is a 24,000 square foot space that houses the largest makerspace on campus, as well as a hub for all things design. It showcases everything from student work, courses, hands-on prototyping, lots of design work, lectures, seminars. The courses and activities there are very much hands-on and focused on making. There's also a master's program that is a 3-semester master's program that brings together and really elevates design on campus across technologies with a focus on design thinking and social justice. There's courses. I'll just briefly mention some of the kind of interesting things. These are all student projects. These are maybe 3-week long projects, but students really work physically and prototype in materials that are available, as well as digital fabrication tools. Some of the projects are more political in nature. So these are ones where they were designing kind of almost protest objects. It's an air quality mask that you would wear. This is a sort of dystopian view of your future where you wear clothing and masks that keep retinal scans and voice detection from knowing who you are. It's your identity armor. This is a project that won a lot of awards. The Collective Obscura, this is a sort of triptych of designs for clothing to thwart facial recognition tools. This is a project that is designed to push back on your personal space. So as someone approaches you, in this case, this woman, this skirt pushes you back. Get out of my space, okay? Similar, this is Iris, which is a project designed for if someone has some touching that's not permitted, then you get called out and image and video is taken of you by this clothing. And finally, the toxic tie. This is a project that it listens using machine learning techniques, and if it hears misogynistic language, the tie slaps you in the face. So you get the idea. These are sort of playful experiences, but they touch on very serious, important topics. Now, I do want to talk about research. So I'm going to say a little bit about wearables and digital fabrication. And one of the first is thinking about wearable technology. And we always start, of course, we are well aware we're scientists and engineers, but we want to look at how artists look at wearables. And this is some early work that's really interesting from the 1950s. Also, wearables is not just about the clothing, it's about your whole presentation of self. Artists such as Stellar, who's put a kind of an ear onto his arm, it's also kind of a wearable. We've looked broadly at how artists think about the body, performance, presentation of self, experiences with electronics, and how that can be a new way of thinking. And the reason we do this is I really like this quote again from Marshall McLuhan: artists show us how to ride with a punch rather than taking a knockout on the chin. And I think that's a good way to think about how we can work with artists. Now, one of the things that we've done is thought about, of course, you're familiar with wearables. You might have a smartwatch on, you might have a Fitbit. There's all kinds of things on the market now. As researchers, we want to think, what are the new landscapes where wearables might emerge? How can it create a conversation that's pushing back on things such as these norms about fashion and what is beauty and gender and identity, and really letting people be playful and experience a broad range of ways of interacting. So here's the landscape you may be used to. They look like these kind of things, but what's common? They have these flat screens. So they're usually kind of some flat surface. What are other things? Well, you have to take them off sometimes. They're not always with you. And another thing is you have this nightmare if you are at all living in this ecosystem. This may be another future state too. Where is my belt compatible with my shirt compatible? Do I have the latest firmware for such and such? And of course, this nightmare of also constant messages, binging, poking, prodding, and such. So we try to look at some different materials. We had a chance to collaborate with the Google Jakatdar team and think about how we could create new kinds of threads and clothing that actually had non-emissive kinds of visual experiences. And this is part of a project called EB, which we looked at how you could design clothing that would change over time. So I dressed this way today. If you see me later, I'll probably look pretty much the same, but think about clothing or things that change over time. And it could be, there's a wide range of how you might change styles, or it might be playful. There's a whole question of who authors these and how that interacts, how you might have, clothing that allows for based on context or based on any kinds of factors. And you might say, well, this is goofy. People don't do this. I think anyone in the kind of gaming community or online, people use everything from emojis to, all kinds of, ways to put augmented reality over them and such. Another project we thought about was, we sort of cheated because there is power required for that. So we thought, could we have a device that we could just sort of put things on us? And the idea was to use a mobile device. You could take pictures, you could capture any kind of imagery. In this case, it's just sort of a grayscale, and you would tap it onto your clothing and it would transmit that. Now, what's really going on under the hood is it's using the coupling and the power to actually charge an e-ink display and then send it to there. So you can actually think about drawing and making kinds of marks and tagging people and changing things pretty dynamically. Of course, you can do this with kind of any space. So we did some things with, here's a shoe that you can kind of change, and it could have some kind of a heart, or someone could transmit anything to it. You could also just brush against someone's, book bag or backpack. You could be walking through someone's house and something appears. There's all kinds of interaction styles that we explored. This is all work we sort of published and worked on. Now, the point is that you also, once you remove the device, it stays, because e-ink is a bistable material. Of course, if you leave your phone in your pocket or something like that, it'll actually continue to power it. So you can actually power kind of fun animations and things. We also looked at how fingernails can be an interesting surface for interaction. So as you touch things, we also have this e-ink design for fingernails. And in fact, if you look, there was a movie from the 80s, which actually showed this kind of future envisionment. And we're sort of thinking about how the kind of interactions might be, everything from reminders to health and well-being. All right, hair. I need a prop. Okay, I don't have hair, but a lot of my students do, and others. So what about human hair as interactive material? Hair is quite an interesting social phenomenon. First of all, it's very personal, but it's very public. We see people's hair. It gives off visual cues. It gives us some individual identity about who we are. And it also tells us the kind of group we might be associated with. And so often we're using it as a signaling tool. It's also super malleable. People change the length and the style and the color all the time. And similarly, it's sometimes for certain relationships forms an intimate bond. There's often braiding and touching it's a very interesting dynamic that is very social, and how can we think about the kinds of interactions that occur and capture that and make it somehow something that is playing into a kind of computer mediated interaction. So what we did was basically, we have some machine learning techniques where we can classify the kinds of ways that you touch your hair, and we can actually create a vocabulary out of that. And then on the output, we can signal things like the color change. And finally, we can also get actual shape change to occur in the hair. So why would we do this? What kinds of things happen? This is a scenario. Someone might send you a message, where are you? Now, normally you get this on your phone, but why couldn't you get it on your hair, right? So your hair moves up, you feel it, great. Now I need to reply. You don't pull out your phone, right? So you basically reply through a gesture through your hair. And so a certain gesture will trigger, oh, great, I'm on my way. Okay, and of course, similarly, there's ways that we can, of course, change your hairstyle. There's sort of subtle changes, and there's sort of more dramatic changes that can occur. This is all, there's much more to kind of talk about. I'm trying to give you kind of teasers so you have things to think about what's coming. All right, and of course, this is the performative style. So this is actually, there aren't wires here from the ceiling. This is actually kind of it working in a dramatic way. Okay, I only touched on hair from a very quick standpoint. There's lots of really fascinating cultural aspects that we'd like to explore more, but hopefully I've got you at least interested in thinking about how hair can be a really tremendous interaction. All right, end of that performance. All right. Biggest organ that you have is your skin. We looked at how skin, there's lots of researchers here at Berkeley looking at skin. For us, we wanted to look at a low-cost technique for people to design interactive experiences on the skin. And for this, we basically looked at how we could create sort of capacitive sensing, resistive sensing. We create strain gauges. And this is very low cost, fairly durable. The idea is that your skin can become this interface using, similar to kind of temporary tattoo. We have a technique for doing that. You can sort of sense your movement. And of course, we can transmit sort of secret messages from loved ones. A little heart can be flashing. We have lots of examples. Again, teasing you with lots of little things quickly. The final thing about sort of the skin and the bodies, we're working with Chris Peaster and some of his graduate students on some new MEMS technology. They do fascinating work looking at how to do robotic platforms. We're looking at how to create extremely small, very different kind of sort of tactile experience. And in this case, we're using, you can see it's 250 microns, and I'll give you a little video. This is what it looks like when it's literally poking onto someone's finger. And you'll see it move between the ridges of someone's finger. I will tell you the difference is you're used to haptics where you touch, vibrate, feel things. This feels very different. We've done lots of qualitative experiences. This feels like a little breeze going by, or very subtle kind of touching, or a little bug on you. So that creates very different vocabulary for haptics. And we can also do small scale. We can attach this in multiple places. Okay, I have a couple more things to talk to you about fabrication. I mentioned that we do things with maker spaces, lots of new tools. Many of you are well acquainted with things like laser cutters and 3D printers. We also try to make our own kinds of digital tools. In this case, how can you do wood joinery? So this was a tool that lets you really do wood joinery. This is done by the tool. I don't know how to do wood joinery, but this tool lets you learn skills and also prompts you and provides different kinds of instructions on how to assemble things. And also it keeps track of what you're doing. If you want to make a change, and understands that it can adapt to what you want to do. A lot of other planning and details I'm leaving out. Another tool in that space was a tool that provided basically haptic feedback and augmented reality for a lathe. And so you can now feel what a material might be like to cut. You can actually kind of undo operations. You can see a virtual augmented representation of what you're making. And then it remembers what you do. You can play back, and you can also get a sense of how it feels to cut through different materials. There's a lot of other things in this particular project. We also looked at how robots can be companions in this making operation. In this case, I'm going to let about 30 seconds of a video play that hopefully explain this if it's working right. And it's not working. All right. It is playing. It is playing. But you can't.
Our system consists of the robot, a custom force torque sensor, the desired tool, and a projection augmented reality display. Here we show the readings from our force torque sensor, which are used to compute motions for the robot. Inspired by workshop jigs, this system can selectively constrain the user's motions depending on the task through software. To demonstrate a range of applications, we showcase 4 tools that can be used with the droid. To use a hand drill with our system, the user selects that option through the graphical user interface and mounts the tool to the robot. After the drill is loaded, the AR system projects crosshairs onto the table to show where the drill is pointing. When the drill nears one of the virtual grids, it will physically snap to the grid, like a haptic controller. When adjusting the orientation of the drill, the AR view visualizes the current heading and elevation. For precise drilling, the user presses the latching button to constrain the drill along the current axis of the drill bit. Here, the user is working with the measurement.
The point I want to make is, yes, I realize that this is an extremely expensive robot and doesn't really be cost efficient of what you want to do, but we want to think about how some tools and some mechanisms, like for robots, can have constraints, and we can help. They can be helpful in the way that our tools respond, learn, and also kind of guide us, remember things, playback. There's a lot of things that we're looking at in that space. All right. Final thing is about another kind of making. We actually got inspiration from artists again, this auto-destructive art movement. So people like Gustav Metzger and many others looked at how things get destroyed.
Gustav Metzger founded the auto-destructive art movement that promoted destruction as a critical but less recognized form of artistic gesture. Metzger created public auto-destructive art with acid, fire, and machines to foreground disintegration as a first-class artistic gesture. Numerous artists have explored this theme, such as Zhang Tangli's homage to New York, an elaborate kinetic sculpture that gyrated and collapsed, destroying itself in the process. In Shooting Picture, Nikki Desai-Fall took aim quite literally at her paintings, obliterating them in the process. More recently, Banksy's Girl with Balloon underwent a destructive transformation at auction when, upon sale, it promptly destroyed itself as onlookers stood by in shock. But our creative tools only emphasize making. For example, today's three-dimensional modeling software offer us only limited atomic operations, such as extrude, revolve, sweep, and loft. We argue for a radical expansion to this vocabulary with a wide range of new unmaking atomic operations, such as crack, bulge.
Not show you all of that vocabulary, but I'll tell you, we are interested in how this unmaking is not about just destroying things. It's about thinking about a life cycle of design. It's about thinking about how things can change over time. It's designing in the way that something might.
We'll now walk through an unmaking workflow that we have developed to operationalize splitting and bulging. Unmaking can be implemented with a variety of materials and fabrication strategies. The strategy that we take as our example is to 3D print a model using a conventional plastic such as PLA and selectively design in hidden chambers of an active material. Here, we use thermally expanding microspheres, or TEMs. Upon heating, these microspheres swell like balloons. By modulating conditions such as heating temperature and time, TEMs hidden inside PLA objects create controllable unmaking effects as they expand within. To enable the design of such.
All right, I want to make sure we stay on time, so I'm going to finish with one last thing. Hopefully you get the idea about unmaking. There's many more things we're doing with it, but I want to show this idea of using entirely biodegradable materials for electronics. And in this application, we've actually taken a leaf. There's a process that we performed on it, but the leaf can basically become, if you see in this picture, it's mounted onto just a piece of paper, and it becomes a heater. We can actually heat and warm things inside of And this is the last thing I will tease you with. And it's good I'm coming right before lunch. I know this doesn't look delicious, but this is deliciously awesome to me. You may not know what you're looking at, but you're looking at an edible supercapacitor. So this has charcoal, cheese, egg whites, and in fact, this is edible power. And we're looking at how to integrate these designs. Here it is actually kind of being put together. And okay, this little tape is not edible, I get it, okay, but we're close. But we can actually charge it and we can power small electronics. And this is we're really focused on environmental issues and how we can do very interesting things with very limited resources. Yes, this is not going to be a supercomputer. It doesn't have a fancy instruction set, but you can do fascinating things with very low power, and that's where we're going. So I end there. Thank you, and thanks to all the students and collaborators for that. Hopefully I didn't go over it. Oh, yeah, I don't know who's running the schedule. I think I want to make sure we're on time, so I was going to hand off, but if there's anything you want, I'm happy to do something.
Are there any questions for Eric?
Yeah. All right. I can be located, so anyone send email or details or digital things. All right. Thank you. Alan, perfect. Do you need the wig? No. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to introduce you first. Okay, so while Alan is setting up, oh, we have this one. So our next speaker is Dr. Alan Yang. He is the executive director of the FHL Vive Center for Enhanced Reality. I guess he's got quite a varied background, actually. He started a few companies and has been involved with a few, right? 5 of them, I suppose. Yeah. And he also has an army of Masters of Engineering students. This is a true thing, right? I saw that on
Yes, that's right.
What is it, 30 of them or something? Is it
30, yes.
Yeah.
About 30.
He's got a lot of Masters in Engineering students that he's working with to do all sorts of fun things. And the fun thing that he's going to be talking about today is ROAR. The sheet doesn't have your title on it, so I'm going to.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you are sharing right now. So his title is Berkeley Robot Open Autonomous Racing, or acronym ROAR, Advancing Vehicle Autonomy for Extreme Scenarios. And this is a fun project, I understand, that students are participating in with some interesting goals. Okay, looks like he's ready to go.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. Good morning. My name is Alan Yang. Today, I'm very excited to introduce a project that we have been working on for the past 3 years called Robot Open Autonomous Racing. So this project, I think, is very exciting to us because it combines the state-of-the-art reinforcement learning and robotics and certain, you can see, autonomous driving, also with the AI racing. And later on, I'm going to tell you a little bit about STEM education for democratizing AI education in the high school level. And also, you notice the acronym ROAR, Robot Open Autonomous Racing. There are 2 reasons we also choose the acronym ROAR. One reason is because a lot of people know that the Berkeley mascot is a bear, who can roar. And the second one is that when you think about racing, when you wrap the engines, and the engine will usually provide a roaring sound. So I think that this is also a proper acronym for our project. And later on, during my introduction, if you are interested about the project, we have a website for you, roar.berkeley.edu. So certainly, ROAR is about advancing what we understand in research and development of autonomous driving. So is there any way I can get rid of this? But it's okay. There's a top bar over there. More. I don't know, some high floating. Okay, I think that's better. Okay, so we are trying to advance at Berkeley, with our faculty and students, and also working with our industry partner to advance our understanding about autonomous driving. Of course, when you look at the street right now, you are not going to find any full autonomous cars driving around, and really, fundamentally could change people's lives in our future society. So I want to open the presentation with a understanding about the value proposition of autonomous driving. I think that for that purpose, Dr. Seshia, the former CEO of Mercedes-Benz, said it the best. So in here, I'm just going to quote his proclamation he gave at the CES 2015 keynote. In this keynote, he actually said that Mercedes is a luxury brand, but however, from his perspective, the most important luxury goods in life is private space and quality time with family. And then he believed that autonomous driving, the full autonomous driving of the future, will give that private space and quality time, for our everyday consumers, better than any other luxury goods for today or near the future. And I know that because of the audience today at Berkeley, that I'm probably preaching to the choir that from the car industry, they have already partitioned all the possible variations of autonomy solutions into 5 levels. Basically, for level 1, you can today go to any car dealership and configure your cars to have some of those features. Level 2 and level 3 are the like of Tesla Autopilot or GM Super Cruise. You can also buy today, from their high-end models. When we talk about level 4, and we have the example of Waymo Robotaxi or the GM Cruise Robotaxi, they are driving on the road. And when you walk into a Robotaxi, you basically can give up your full control of the car to a robot. But however, those taxis can only navigate within a certain limited perimeter of some urban areas. When we talk to level 5, then basically the robots can control any possible cars and can go from point A to point B, for example, from San Francisco to Boston under all scenarios, all conditions. So that is level 5. Of course, today you can already, as I mentioned, you can already buy level 2 and level 4 solutions from some car brands such as Tesla, GM, or Mercedes. And as researchers, we are naturally aiming for the next big thing, which is level 4 to level 5 autonomy. However, depending on whom you are going to talk to, so there are very divergent viewpoints about where the era of full autonomous cars will arrive at people's, normal people's driveways. For example, Elon Musk gave a quite public interview just a couple of weeks ago. He actually said that Tesla is expected to offer full level 5 autonomy solutions as a beta system to all the qualified Tesla owners, and then they are going to fully open up the test drive of level 5 autonomy this year in 2022. And we can also look at the press release from Mercedes and NVIDIA back in 2020. At that time, they actually announced a roadmap to create a revolutionary in-vehicle computing system, which is due in 2024. You need to have enough good sensors and good computing power to be able to support level 5. However, you can also have another group of people who are more conservative about the prospect of full autonomous driving. For example, Steve Wozniak, whom the name of this lounge we are sitting on is named after. He actually said that in 2019 that he did not expect that he will see in his lifetime the implementation of full autonomous systems. And then the Forbes magazine also reported this year, 2022, based on a Accenture article, which I quote, that despite the hype that Liberation Day will dawn soon and cars will drive themselves, there's no realistic chance that full-on self-driving will be available before 2030. And then only in a tiny number of top-of-the-range sedans and SUVs. So in this pursuit of, relentless pursuit of level 5 autonomy, one of the key factors is the cost to cross the last mile from research to deliver the products to the consumers. Certainly, in Silicon Valley or anywhere around the world, they are really, really great startup teams and researchers. They are certainly technically capable. But however, the sheer cost of from research to deliver final products for level 5 autonomy is just too costly. even for some major companies, such as one of the most successful companies, Dyson from UK, and people know about Apple, have on and off trying to jumpstart an autonomous car project. Well, in academia, for example, in Berkeley, we know how to save cost. That is, if you want to develop some project, and then the hardware itself is very expensive, what we can do is to stay in working on data sets for simulation, right? However, the simulation in pursuing level 5 is not enough. For one example is the Berkeley BDD, very good research group. A couple years ago, they worked with the Baidu to actually launch a open source Apollo dataset. With the dataset, researchers can just extract the data from the dataset and also demonstrate the performance of their new algorithms. However, when we step from level 2 to level 3, to level 4 to level 5, self-driving cars will need to share roads, at least initially, for extended period of time with pedestrians and human drivers who may not obey traffic rules. So these special situations, we think that the simulation alone will not be enough to close the gap and cover all these unexpected corner cases that only exist in real world, right? So if the simulation is real world, then they may not call simulation anymore. And our observation is also agreed upon by an article from University of Michigan, the so-called MCT-ABC test. In this report, it claims that perfecting self-driving cars will require extensive testing with humans in the loop. So in particular, in this report, and then you are free to download the report online, it actually stated that if we're looking at level 3 and level 4 solutions for around 50 common scenarios for autonomous driving are already well managed by most of the autonomous driving solutions. These include car following, lane changing, and left turns. And these decisions typically only involve a relatively a well-conditioned environment and a single car's decision. However, we also have corner cases that have led to very public accidents. Everybody knows about those in the real world. And unfortunately, few companies really willing to share what they know about the most challenging cases where their solutions will most likely to fail. And then many of these cases involve other motorists, other motorcyclists, and pedestrians. So with this observation, our goal at Berkeley for developing the ROBOT project is to develop a new AI platform for extreme applications. So what do I mean by that? So we put out 4 criteria for developing this new platform. Number one is that we have to draw a line on the sand, right? Because owning full-scale autonomous cars are very expensive, even for Berkeley. So we draw a line on the sand that we want every car with the full capability of autonomous driving, can be switching between human driving and autonomous driving, and to have less than $1,000 cost basis. And second, we want extreme capability for its software. So we want its software to be compatible with the most popular simulations and autonomous driving prototypes. Number 3, of course, during the experiment, we want the platform to allow us to collect human in the loop control and sensing data for testing. But at the same time, we don't want to risk any human life and property damages. And finally, we have some extreme applications in our minds by talking to different type of people. For example, corner case research, extreme AI racing. So for some of you, if you may not know, AI racing is actually a very trendy topic for the past two years. And also fleet control. Think about, instead of having one cars, having a fleet of cars. How the fleet of autonomous cars combine with manual driving cars passing through the Bay Bridge, for example, and intelligent transportation. We have research groups in Berkeley studying those problems. And finally, as I mentioned, a new STEM education program for K-12 students to democratize AI education. Okay, so let's start. So when we look at the landscape, in fact, the pain point of the high cost of doing autonomous driving research in AI community has been well known for almost all the key players. We are not the first to come up with these design criteria for new platforms. And there are existing low-cost AI racing hardwares. Some of the examples are listed here, such as the DuckyBot, the Donkey Car, and the MIT race car, the UPenn F-110, and the Amazon AWS Deep Racer. In here, I'm just giving you some examples. None of them actually fully satisfy the requirements we put out in the previous slide. Give you some example. The MIT racer, the race car, and then F-110s, and their cost is way beyond the $1,000. And if you look at the extreme low cost platforms such as the Ducky and also the Donkey, certainly they are very, very expensive, very, very cheap. But however, faculty members and students will be reluctant to use those platforms because they don't have enough computing resources and also the compatibility to communicate with the standard research platforms in AI and autonomous driving. So in the past 3 years, we have developed several generations of the reference raw hardware design. So in here, I'm giving you a snapshot of some of the typical specifications, such as we can convert any 1/10 scale up to 1/16 scale radio control model cars into manual driving and autonomous driving compatible. And then we can put a NVIDIA Jetson NX and a microcontroller on the platform. And until last year, we use Intel RealSense D45i, which is a depth camera on the front in here to provide depth information. So it's like a fixed static LiDAR sort of replacement information. And our software will allow the driver to turn on the autopilot to let the car to drive by itself or take control of the car fully manually in virtual reality. So the system, thanks to NVIDIA's computing power, we can stream back and forth camera and then form a 360 surrounding view. And then a human driver can sit in a virtual reality and wear the VR headset as if they are sitting on a full-scale car. Again, extreme safety without risking any human lives. And those tiny cars, if you bump into walls, it's not going to cause damage to your building. And then in terms of the performance, the basic model can drive up to 30 miles per hour, which based on what we learned from other people are more than enough to do any research in autonomous driving initially. But if you upgrade the motor to the top of the line brushless motor, it can go up to 70 miles per hour. So this is speed that in California you can even get a highway ticket from the highway patrol. It's certainly a very capable platform. And then so in terms of really creating a software stack and to seamlessly allow students to develop the research in artificial intelligence and autonomous driving in one time, but then deploy to a variety of different platforms, our software using Python also adopt a virtualization layer, as you can see in here. And our core platform in Python contains basic autonomous driving functions. You can just call environment mapping, environment perception, motion planner, and PID and MPC controllers. And then through the virtualization layer, our code doesn't need to know that it's talking to a software simulator, a OpenAI machine learning, reinforcement learning gene, or a real car hardware. You will issue the same command through the virtualization layer with hopefully zero code change. And then next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the left-hand side, which is the simulation. And of course, when we first develop autonomous driving prototypes, we want to first test that in simulation. In the past year, because of pandemic, most of our labs have closed. So our students actually cannot get to the hardware that they need to do the development. So we work with the Berkeley architecture department, and the student painstakingly carry a 3D scanner on the top of their car. And just like any Google mapping cars and Apple mapping cars, they use the LiDAR to map a large area. You can see from the left-hand side, including the Berkeley downtown area, and going through the Claremont and the Grizzly Peak mountain roads, for those people who are familiar with the Berkeley neighborhood. And then they also create a one-to-one mapping of the model of the Berkeley buildings along the track that the student has mapped. So in this case, our students can test how the algorithm driving a one-to-one real car ratio cars models in the Berkeley neighborhood. And then if there's anything wrong, they will actually expect the same algorithm will make the same mistake in real world. So next, let me play you some video of this model. so there's no sound. Okay, so you can see in here, this is what we call the Berkeley major map. And then you go through Bancroft, Oxford, and then the Hearst, and then go all the way up to the Claremont Hotel and go down from the back of the Memorial Stadium. And all the buildings, if you can recognize, is one-to-one model of the real building in Berkeley neighborhood. It's just a low poly model. So they are not high poly because to save the computing power for running the simulation. And then you can see all those bumps. So they are real elevation changes around the Berkeley neighborhood. And because our ROAR software is fully open source, you can download from the GitHub today. And our student has already connected ROAR software into OpenAI, for example, TensorFlow or PyTorch reinforcement learning algorithm. And you can see in this case, when you started to teach reinforcement learning agent to explore the world at the beginning, the car is driving quite carelessly. It's just bumping into roads, and then it will stop, and then it will re-begin. So that is how you train a reinforcement learning agent. It's like training a baby. So we are not holding hands to tell them how they should do. In fact, our system merely provide candies like rewards or penalties to tell them what is good behavior, what is not a good behavior. So using our ROAR software plus the simulator, you can actually start training your reinforcement learning agent. So next, I'm going to show you two polar, very different examples, as illustrating how the students learn their very first reinforcement learning class lesson using the ROAR platform. So in here, I'm showing you one of the first results. So this is at the beginning, one of our student teams designed a reward function which will penalize the autonomous driving agent whenever they bump into the obstacle. And then there's going to be a penalty, negative penalty. And then we also have a time penalty. If you drive too slowly and not crossing the finish line, and we also have a penalty for you. But soon after we started this experiment, our student team walked into my office and with a really serious look on their face. And then they said to me that, Alan, I think that our reinforcement learning agent just learned something that they are not supposed to learn. And I asked, what did they learn? And the student told me that the reinforcement learning agent learned to commit suicide. What happened was that if you look at this curve here, so because our penalties are all negative, no matter you hit the road or you are going to continue to drive, it's going to be all negative. So as you are optimizing, the strategy to drive fast, it's continue the penalty, objective function is going to be continued to negative. Soon in round 11, so that reinforcement learning agent suddenly realized that after finish one lap, if it intentionally crashed the car right from the beginning, it's going to optimize the negative reward the best. So the best strategy, if you have a world of all negative penalties, is to, I don't know if the right word, commit suicide right at the beginning. So we have to solve this problem. So in the next iteration, we also borrow some of the inspiration around Berkeley for people who live in Berkeley for a long time. You know that there is a saying in Berkeley saying that there's no life without coffee. So maybe in the world of really hard work, we really need to give people some guilty pleasure, right? Some candy and some coffee to really wake you up, right? So exactly that's what we did. In here, I don't know if you know very clearly that as you are driving, we introducing some way lines. When the car crossed the way line the first time, we're going to give you some candy. We're going to give you some coffee to wake you up. So as soon as you add the positive positive reward to your penalty function, and we are starting to see something amazing, extraordinary. So just that simple change, right? Let me show you the video here. So in here, you are seeing that the vehicle learning to hug the outside lane is all by themselves. There's no teaching by human. And then when a corner comes, it cuts to the inside lane. What is this? If you watch Formula One, that is the race line. So without teaching anything, so now it's hugging the right side very, very closely. We don't know why. But then after a while, you will see. Because there's a turn coming up. It's hugging the right side, the far side lane very, very closely. And then it cuts to the inside lane. Here. And it's all doing that. Whether it's left side or left turn or right turn, it actually learned how to optimize the strategy for following the race line without us telling them anything. So that is amazing. Our students are so excited by the single change, right? So that really just show you one example the students have learned about their very first reinforcement learning research using the raw platform. And then let me also play you a video that because our platform is agnostic about the hardware and also compatible with a lot of software, late last year, we were invited to work with we named it the Pacific Racing Team with the University of Hawaii and UCSD to jointly participate in this year's Indy Autonomous Challenge. So I'm going to play you a video, which is a section of our seminar announcing our partnership to go after Indy. Oh, so there's no sound. Okay, so here's the problem. Okay, so let me. So I don't know if, okay, so there's no sound. Okay, so let me just explain to you a little bit. So there is a Netflix documentary that really followed the Indy Autonomous Challenge annually. And in here, roughly you have about 8 cars. They are racing in full-fledged racing circuits. For this year, there are 2 races scheduled. One is in Texas in November, around Dallas, the Texas Speed Motorway. And then the second one, of course, is going to go back into CES next year in January. And then the system is going to drive the full-scale Dallara chassis without any human input. Once you put the car on the driveway or on the raceway, then you have to give up all human control. And then for last year, they have already started 2 cars racing with each other. Not 9 cars, not 10 cars like Formula One, because we're still at its infancy. But people are starting to introduce racing and car dueling, which is other with the fully perception suite and also the computing units on board. And all you can do is watch the race of the car, and hopefully your car wins. Okay, and hopefully we can get some good results for this year. Okay. And then another thing that we very fortunate to work with Professor Bayen at the Institute of Transportation Study, as I mentioned, that when you really want to study not just a single car's behavior, but a fleet cars, think about how to best control a fleet of cars to cross the Bay Bridge, with the hybrid autonomous cars and the manual cars. Of course, everybody knows assembling a car fleet of 100 autonomous cars are very, very expensive. So at Berkeley, using the raw platform, we are working with Professor Bayen to really prototype whether some of the traffic scenarios can be really replaced from 100,000 cars to $1,000 cars. So in here, this is one of the successful experiments we have tested called adaptive cruise control. So in this case, you have a lead car that is going to vary its speed and trying to drive in the front. And then we have a following car, the raw car, which is a tiny little car. And then we're using PID control, try to follow it, but keep the same distance. And this is the average distance air that we measured. We, just a couple weeks ago, and you can see that it's very close to 0. So that means that with the real car acceleration results, our model cars, although it's very cheap, is able to follow, the lead car and being able to demonstrate adaptive cruise control. So the last slide I'm going to mention is that democratizing AI education for high schools. Now, if you think about really owning the hardware and software full stack, universities is already very expensive. How do we teach students, high school students, about AI? Together with the Python programming and computer vision, so on and so forth, in their labs in high school today, right? So last year, working under the advice of College of Engineering, and then also thanks to the raw platform, we launched a raw academy. Just after the Berkeley campus just reopened, we admitted the first 60 students, and then you can see some of the students were shown over there with their masks, so as a sign of the time. And then out of the statistics we have collected after the 2-week intensive summer camp for Raw Academy, we collected some student reports. Due to the interest of time, I will just highlight one number here. For our 60 students, 80% of the students, after taking the Raw Academy, they are more encouraged to learn about robotics and AI projects, and then are willing to consider computer science and EE as their college majors. And I think that is a great achievement not just for competition, but also for educating the next generation of students. Okay. With that, I'm going to close my talk. As the summary, the goal of our project called ROAR is to create a new AI platform for extreme applications. And I think that we are by and large succeeded in drawing a line on the sand to really pursue a quite capable hardware and software reference design with only less than $1,000. And then we have made the system to be compatible with the Kala, OpenAIG, ROS, Apple AI Kit, and the latest indie autonomous challenge, Dalara chassis. And then some of the applications we have considered, including corner cases, autonomous driving, extreme AI racing, fleet control, and intelligent transportation, and certainly new STEM education program called ROAR Academy. So if you're interested about our project, please visit our website called roar.berkeley.edu. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, Alan. We're a bit behind schedule, but while Alex is coming in to set up, are there any questions for Alan?
Yeah. I'll just quit. Thank you very much.
You're already online? Okay, you are. Okay, so let me go ahead and introduce our last speaker. So this is Professor Alex Bayen. He's a professor in electrical engineering and computer sciences. He's also has a joint appointment in civil engineering, civil and environmental engineering. He has been for a long time the director of the Institute for Transportation Studies, and very recently he has become the associate provost for Moffett Field Program Development, something that I think he's going to talk about a bit today. His research focuses on the modeling and control of distributed parameter systems. That includes large-scale infrastructure systems, transportation, and water distribution. I guess his title, which is not on his sheet, so I have to.
It's right behind you.
Oh, it is. This Moffett Field Project Development update.
Thank you. Thank you, Clark. Welcome, everybody. This is, I'm actually talking to three audiences. Hi to our online viewers. Hi, Claire.
Alex.
This is our department chair. We have a group visiting from Polytechnique, and welcome. This will be the English portion of your day today. For our good friends in the electrical engineering and computer science department, it's a bit of a different talk than what you've had so far. That it's not a technical talk. It's really about academic innovation, and it's about a project that we have embarked on for the last 2 years. That is a 99 years project. I know that sounds ambitious. I'll explain why. And in which this department and its researchers will be very involved, hopefully. So let me start here. Many years ago, the university had shown interest to increase its presence in the peninsula for a variety of reasons. And this is something that we've always been toying with over the last 10 years. You might know that UC Santa Cruz and others have been present at NASA. And finally, 2 years ago, we decided to embark on that journey. And that's what I want to share with you today. So if you're not familiar with the geography of the Bay Area enough to know about the south of the peninsula, if you drive down 101, at some point you'll drive by this big hangar, which now looks more like this. And on your left, if you drive south, you'll see this big complex that used to be a naval base and is now owned by NASA. And the campus has recently, as in 2 years ago now, entered a 99 years lease agreement with NASA to develop a new campus, lack of a better term, so second campus, park, we can name it anything we want for now, which is in this parcel here that is about 36 acres of land, on which the plan is to build about 1.4 million square feet of offices and buildings, which, if that doesn't mean much to you, is about 1.5 times the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco in terms of space. So that's pretty big. This is what it looks like. And the campus is likely, or this new campus is likely to open in about 5 years from now. And part of my job in the title that Clark just mentioned as an associate provost is to plan for this, for the academic part of it, not so much for the development part. Again, if you're not too familiar with the geography, this is in the middle of Silicon Valley. That's the base, that's our parcel, and you can see the people around. I mean, you'll recognize most of the usual suspects. For that, in particular, you might also know that other universities have done the same, in particular in New York and Cornell. So we would like to move in today, but we won't have buildings open until 5 years from now. So likely we're going to see if we can seek incubation at Microsoft and Google. And this is reminiscent in some ways of things that others have done in the past. Note also that in the future, when we're open, there's a bridge over Stevens Creek, so you can really walk through Microsoft. I've done it. I used to live there. I used to run on that path. And then Google is now also developing on this part of campus. So this will be co-located with both Google and Microsoft. There's an interesting philosophical question about this model. It's difficult to open a satellite campus, and there's no single model. And I think right now, the Berkeley campus is legitimately wondering, what is it we're going to build there, besides the buildings? The first type of model that people have thought about is the model of an industry park. That's maybe the least ambitious in terms of what we can do, but that's going to grant us a footprint there. So an industry park, you could think about CMU West, which, I mean, people have talked about in different ways, but which has been there for 17 years and is still there, or the Discovery Park in Purdue. And with that, it's pretty much minimal presence of Berkeley staff and faculty and students, and it's mostly an industry presence, a consortium built there that will build loose connections and hopefully joint activities with the campus. And that model is financially self-sustainable. I'm going to skip the details here, but it's something that we can certainly do. Others have done that before. There's a model for it. The second model that is of potential interest is the model of a research hub. If you're familiar with a JPL close to Caltech or LBNL here on this campus, you can see with these models of a national lab or some form of federally owned and operated entity, there is more interpenetration. People have joint appointments. There's LBNL faculty on campus and vice versa. And with that, you can do also different types of funding. So the interpenetration is much bigger. So that's a more ambitious thing. And in some ways, the previous provost, Paul Visados, when he launched this phase of the program, really referred the historical analogy with LBNL for this program. Now, my favorite is really what I think we should be seeking for. Could be, okay, so this is an interesting case where the network has gone down, and now what I see and what you see is not the same. Okay, so, and it says your internet connection is unstable. This is the computer science building, so things are gonna reestablish themselves soon, don't worry. I'm sure we have good people working on it. Okay, so I'm not sure what to suggest here. Okay, so I can sing and dance while the electrons come. Well, I'm pushing forward, but it's somehow, since I'm sharing my screen over Zoom, what you see is not what I see, because the network seems to be down. So, okay. Yeah, no. Oh, now it's working. All right. Just put social pressure on the electrons and they will keep moving. Okay, so the third model is the model of a residential campus. That's way more ambitious. And there's many examples, and it's an interesting change in academics if you think about building an external campus. So you might remember, oh, Cornell Tech. Okay, so sorry, there's a delay. So yeah, perfect. Cornell Tech started developing a second campus. For those of you who are not familiar with geography, Cornell is in Ithaca, so it's very rural New York. But now they have an island in the middle of Manhattan where they can essentially do the same as they do on the Ithaca campus, slightly different, but it's essentially taken its life on its own. Of course, they're very ambitious targets. It's 200 faculty over 20 years, but it's an interesting model that has been so far very successful. Even more ambitious model is, which of course is just here for an analogy, is NYU, also in New York, has established a secondary campus in China and one in Abu Dhabi. I've visited that campus many times. I mean, you could argue it's the size of a few departments, but that one is also taking on its own. So Of course, creating something like this is a lot more ambitious, but this is ultimately, I think, one of the favored models in that if you have the intellectual power there, if you have the faculty there, I think you can have an intellectual life that takes up on its own, and I think that would be one of the aspirations of what we want to do. So none of these models have been settled. I think at this point it's blueprinting and really whiteboarding, but I think that gives you a sense of the spectrum of what are the possibles. So I was talking earlier about academic innovation. Launching academic units like this department is a very long endeavor. And so right now, one of the themes that has been envisioned for this new campus is aerospace. And the way to think about this is that we have about 10 years to launch this initiative, see if we can, so in 5 years, the buildings will open. And hopefully after that, we'll start populating that campus with people we could hire there directly. And after 10 years, do a sunset review. Did it work? Great. Then we continue to grow it. Did it not work? Then we sunset it and start something else. We have the land for 99 years. We're not spending a single dollar to develop the land. We can use it according to a certain process that has been agreed upon with the developers. So we'll have essentially this opportunity to do academic innovation for decade by decade for the nearly 100 years to come. And so one of my jobs right now is to plan the first phase, which is the aerospace initiative. And so we're not working at the scale of Cornell Tech. We're not envisioning to hire 200 faculty over 20 years. It's a very different vision. It's a smaller satellite. It's also embedded with NASA and other units. But the idea is that similar to things that were done in Singapore, where you had an equivalent of 1 or 2 FTEs every year on our satellite site in Singapore, we could consider a rotating or permanent base of 5 to 6 faculty, plus the equivalent number of adjuncts, that's about 10 or 15 maybe faculty, which is enough for an academic unit to take off on its own. And of course, it wouldn't work for an electrical engineering and computer science department, but it would work probably for an aerospace engineering department because the sizes are not the same. And so this is the rationale now is, can we create, is it even possible to create such an entity? What would it take to make it work? You know, if you're going to be living away from the main campus as a faculty, you should have something to compensate for that form of hardship. So maybe a form of housing premium, maybe some funding line associated with that that position, like the Swiss do at EPFL or ETH, and maybe some form of transportation premium. And we'll talk about this later. Now, why aerospace? Well, precisely because we do not have an aerospace department at Berkeley. And that's one of the things which is, there's historical reasons for it. And why aerospace now? Because both in aviation and in air, we're about to undergo drastic revolutions. These numbers are the pre-COVID numbers, but things will return, and maybe they'll return in different ways. But we are going to, aerospace has summers and winters. And I think since the 70s, we have experienced a form of a slow winter. But I think we're going to experience a very, very hot summer very soon. It's already started with space and SpaceX, and you've seen this more than I know. And this will be the decade of electrified, urban, vertical aviation. So both on the aviation part and on the space part, there's a lot of things that are going to happen. And this department has a lot of things to play because it's really all over the place. And so when we think about aerospace, are we going to create a copy of what we have at Stanford, my alma mater in aerospace? I know we're not supposed to say that word here, but okay. Or MIT for that matter. No, because these departments were shaped in the 70s by an industry in the 70s. And then, of course, academic timescales, people like myself can stay up to 30, 40, 50 years in their department. So it takes a lot of time to change. So I think this is aviation in 2022. And when we think about what we could create, it should be very different than fluids, structures, controls, orbital mechanics, or things that would matter maybe in such ways and forms at the time. So for example, when we think about aerospace today, space exploration on its own thrust, which requires different type of skills that you would find in my own department over there. Mission training, things about computing in space and so on. Sustainable autonomy is another one. I mean, at Berkeley, we care a lot about sustainability. And so if we're going to have vertical aviation and electrified aviation, it needs to be cognizant of the environment. And then computing, it's very interesting. Computing in space and computing while airborne is very different than the type of computing that you do, say, in cloud computing. Computing while you're airborne is you cannot reboot. You cannot have an error when you're airborne, because otherwise the flight is not going to be a happy landing. It's going to be fast crashing. And computing in space is also very different. It's you have to work on radiation resistance hardware. You have to work with very low bandwidth, very high latency. And so there's a different type of computing that this department can really help to shape. In aerospace, computing was always an afterthought. you're going to do your thing in MATLAB, and then X people will take it over. And that was fine, maybe in the 90s. But things have changed. I think computing in space, computing while airborne, has a new sets of requirements, and nobody has shaped this world. And we at Berkeley have an opportunity to do that. And I think when we do that, we also want to do it in a way that is open to the rest of the campus. It's not a College of Engineering gig or an X gig. So I think climate change is very important, especially when it comes to aviation. And then social justice, is it just going to be for the rich? Are we just planning aviation and space just for the rich and leaving the rest of humanity behind? So we started in that endeavor, and this department has played a big role in it. We launched a minor in aerospace engineering in 2020. There was a master's of engineering launched by the mechanical engineering department in 2020 as well, with a concentration in aerospace. And this fall, we are going to have our first cohort of aerospace engineering students, 40 people, arrive in Berkeley. The mechanical engineering is now the home department, but again, this is just an incubation. We had to start somewhere, so we took the department, which by proximity is the closest to what aerospace looks today. That's also part of what we have to do to market the program. Note that soon we will probably also have the equivalent in data science. Ultimately, it takes years to create an academic unit, but I would hope that one day, not so distant future, we have a bachelor, master's, and PhD, which at that point means the existence of a corresponding department. And so today, there is a lot of groups on this campus working on these in different aspects of the program. So the College of Engineering has a very active group under our current dean to not just plan for degrees, but also plan for the way our departments will establish a footprint at Moffett. In fact, all the department chairs were contacted, and this department produced a lot of really exciting things that could happen at NASA, not just in aerospace, but also in quantum computing. So it's very likely that there's going to be a lot of action that we see on the ground over there, led by our faculty. CITRIS, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, the Center for Information Technology and Research in the Interest of Society, has launched an aviation group. They have a group of students with student prize to fly drones autonomously further and further away without line of sight. And then there's a lot of clusters that are being created around specific themes, which we feel will be the bridges, the intellectual bridges with NASA. And of course, for those of you who are into startups, the Skydeck is also going to establish a footprint there. So the timeline is long. I'm going to skip that because I think we're a bit behind schedule. But one thing which is important to note is that the campus has started really actively working on this phase of the project in 2019. And there is a lot more action every year just on this. Initially, it was just a planning committee, and then people were appointed. I was appointed. Several groups started to work on their own, and now we even have committees working on the establishment of programs. So this is accelerating. At some point, it will stabilize, but it's very amazing to see that in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of progress, mostly because there's been a lot of enthusiasm on the entire campus. So for example, when we're building affinity clusters, I'm just taking one illustratively here, exobiology, we're already inventorying people who are interested to work with NASA people. So a cluster looks like our faculty together with the NASA faculty on some specific themes of interest to both, and then companies that one day will also populate that new campus with us. The notion being that, if you work in automated aviation, well, maybe you'd like to have an Airbus team next to you that does that happen to want to have an office in Silicon Valley. So part of our jobs over the next coming years is to find the right companies that could be hosted at Berkeley with us at Moffett Field. So this was the original timeline, which we had to push for programmatic reasons. But we're in the process of finalizing these clusters, which hopefully will lead to a blueprint and vision paper with the hope of also establishing a lot of fundraising mechanisms to support that. Finally, there's a challenge that always comes, and that's the challenge of transportation. And that has to do inherently with the model we choose for that new campus. If we establish an industry park, okay, maybe you commute there every once in a while, and that's fine. But if this is something where you're going to work every day, you cannot commute to the South Bay every day. I've done it for 2 years. It's exhausting. It just cannot happen. So we have to invent a new model. And the new model is we're going to build housing there, just like we do on this campus. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Maybe one day we can use the waterways. They're very shallow in the South Bay, so it's not obvious. Google, Facebook, and all these companies are running their own transportation systems. I mean, Google 10 years ago had over 100 buses already. So today, I don't even know how many they have. So the notion that we could partner with them, for example, for those of you who have partial appointments at Google is possible. And those who do not, then hopefully will be able to find other ways to shuttle people. And I know that sounds crazy, but vertical travel will be possible, and that will be my closing point. But before I get there, again, our goal is not to shuffle people every day back and forth. That model will fail. That model is very hard. I think our goal is to establish a permanent presence there, kind of like we did in Singapore, but in a different way, or kind of like we did in Paris with the Sciences Po Paris program, but in a different way, at a different scale. And then once in a while, facilitated travel when needed, whether that's by shuttle or whether that's maybe by helicopter, but not to do this on a daily basis. And of course, when I say by helicopter, then people say you're crazy. But actually, if you think about it, this is the decade of urban aviation. This is the decade of automated aviation. And this is also the decade of electrification of aviation. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to happen on all ranges and for transatlantic flight overnight, but for helicopters, every week we see different prototypes being tested by different companies all around the world. And while the business model is not proven yet, and while the technology is not ready yet, this will happen. My forecast is it will happen over the next 10 years, and we're opening that campus in 5 years. And so the notion that we could be one of the first nodes of an airlink that could be used to transport people. Again, we're not going to have flying buses of students flying back and forth every day to go and take their classes at NASA. That's not the way it works. But the notion that we have air travel enabled for those who need in the proper circumstances, and that we become also part of a bigger network that can be used is a possibility. In fact, we do have landing capabilities at Richmond. We have a helipad, okay? And of course, you can land helicopters on this campus. And of course, as soon as you start landing helicopters on this campus, you're going to have issues with noise abatement and emissions. So it's not that the path is straightforward. But even in the middle of COVID, Blade was flying 700 flights a day between the Hamptons and Manhattan, just for people to commute to go to the city. So clearly there is a model. We're not going to fly conventional helicopters right away, but the notion that we can use this as a living lab for small drones and maybe one day for passenger aircraft is not crazy. And we have a lot of enthusiasts that are ready to help us for this. In fact, UC Davis and UC Merced have airports. UC Santa Cruz is working very closely with Joby Aviation, which is probably going to be one of the emerging leaders in this field. UCSF has landing capabilities with the hospital. They're also going to have a presence probably at Moffett. So you can see how this could grow into a bigger network to pioneer something. And it's not, again, we're not going to bus people back and forth, but the notion is that we could become the first place on the West Coast where automated urban electric flight becomes a reality. Would be also a fantastic way for this department to be innovative. And this is not science fiction. I was mentioning Blade with his 700 flights a day in New York. But in the next 10 years, things like the city bus or the volocopter will probably become available as well. And then the Swiss are already flying Matternet without line of sight for organ transplants and for maybe other medical goods. So it's not just about people, but it's also about contributing to the growth of aviation. A lot of the demand in drone these days is also for blood, for medical tests. Imagine you live in the middle of the valley and you have to have a test. Are you going to drive 5 hours to go to UCSF, or could your samples be transported by helicopter? Could we become part of it? You can see that there's a lot of other cases, use cases that are possible. So it's not science fiction. It starts today, and it's not. And the final word is that what we would like to make this part of our vision. So in other words, why would people one day come to Berkeley to study this new form of aerospace? Because it's also part of inventing a new future that is part of the academic mission. And I think I've made you late for your lunch by 3 minutes, but since we started 10 minutes late, I think hopefully we're a little bit more back on track. And so I think, Clark, I'll just give it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Are there any residual questions for Alex while he's here? What he just spoke about? Yeah, when you talk about lunch, Alex, no one will ask any questions.
That was the word not to use.
Yeah. So we have come upon lunch. We're at the end of our program today, but I think first some thank yous are in order before we end up. And so first person I'd like to thank is Claire Tomlin, who's online right now. She started the meeting, but I think I will just say she put a lot of effort into making this whole meeting come together. So we should all thank Claire. Also, our distinguished alumni awardees who were gracious enough to come and honor us here. So thank you, Noam. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Bruce. And thank you, Nickhil. And finally, our speakers who spent a lot of time organizing these talks and giving these talks. So thank you to Sanjit, Angjoo, Eric, Alan, and Alex. I did get it right there. And finally, last but not least, you can't put a meeting together like this without people who are really behind the scenes who do it. And so I'd like to thank our external relations group. And so that's Bennett Agnew right in the back there. You want to say hello, Bennett? And Jenny Jones back there as well. I don't know if James Green is here. Oh, he is there. Okay, excellent. And finally, Alexandre is there. Am I forgetting anyone? Do I know? Oh, Matthew Santillan right there. He's in all black with a black mask on, so I can't really see him. And Tom Silva is, yeah, there's Tom right there. I think that's everyone, right? Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. And lunch was back there. Is it now outside? Okay, it's now outside. So please pick up your lunch outside and enjoy your lunch outside. Thank you for coming.
Yes, I don't know who that. There are two big ones, but they're not finalized. If you're interested, we should put this landing is still in the Google. Okay, we should definitely. By the way, I'm not going to get the part. No, I know. But I love to connect you with the person. Right, exactly. Because landing was interested also. Okay, so we should talk about how do we do this? I have to run now. Yeah, yes, until May 18th.
Hey, James, thanks very much for enabling the remote. This is Claire.